C'est un des derniers sujets à la Réunion quand même. C'est le dernier sujet à l'ordre du jour, ça fait que il ne serait pas 6 heures.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. We'll get the meeting started. Item 1, roll call. All members of council are present. I'll ask everyone to please stand for the prayer and the national anthem. Attendu que le Canada est fondé sur des principes qui reconnaissent la suprématie de Dieu et la primauté du droit, prenons un moment de réflexion personnelle. Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, let us take a moment of personal reflection. Everyone, merci beaucoup. Item 4, additions, deletions, or amendments. Any additions? No. All right. Adoption of the agenda. Just to clarify that under Councillor Lorrain, item 18, we have amendment to council remuneration expenses. Well, actually, since that's already an item of topic, we'll speak to it as part of, let's see here, item F in the report section. We'll speak at that point in time. So I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented, moved by Conseil Bisson, seconded by Councillor Tonoski. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 6, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, adoption of minutes, regular council minutes of January 13th, 2020. Motion to approve the following minutes as presented. Need a mover and a seconder, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Saucier. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 8, presentations, we have none. Item 9, delegations, we have none. Item 10, consent items. Item A, proclamation for King Canada, February 16th to 22nd, 2020. Item B, request for community grants from the Parks and Recreation Department from the 2020 budget. Item C, the minutes of the Limoges Citizens Committee of December 10th, 2019. Item D, minutes of the Russell Historical Society of December 10th, 2019. And item E, the pay list for December 2019. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Tonoski, seconded by Conseiller Bisson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. We'll move on to items 11, reports from department and council committees. Item A, the 2019 Audit Service Plan from BDO, FS 2020. The council receives the 2019 Audit Service Plan from BDO dated February 3rd, 2020. Monsieur Le Duc, Monsieur Bellet.
Merci, Mr. Mayor. Bonsoir, Chairman du Conseil. So we're entering in our year-end exercise. So we're currently in year 2 of our three-year contract with BDO. Donc ce soir, Madame Mélanie de BDO est avec nous pour, vous avez tous vu le Audit Service Plan dans le package. Annick est ici pour dire un petit mot, puis aussi répondre à vos questions si vous en avez.
Parfait, merci beaucoup, M. Lebrun. Madame Lafont, ça va bien?
Ben oui, merci. Je vais quand même aller assez vite parce que je trouve que vous l'avez vu, mais Charles a fait quelque chose de différent des autres années. So we'll skip page 2 this summer, we'll just go to some pages. So on page 3 we have our audit team. So basically I'm still a partner, Michelle is still the senior manager, and then as far as the senior and two assistants, there's this change this year because of the change of staffing. However, they've been with the firm for a number of years. It's their third year doing audits of municipalities and all bilingual, so it should get the help of the team. The timeline pretty much as presented on page 4. So hoping to, we'll do the year audit in March before and after March break, and then reporting back to council on April 20th. Significant audit risks and plan responses, so similar to what we've had in prior years. So revenue recognition is always present. Management provider of control, same thing, so they're addressed same way as in prior years. So looking at journal entries, sending confirmations for taxes receivable at the end of December. And then we use one of our IS auditors for the supervision rules and making sure everything is fine. Page 6 is the other risks, so anything that's not a significant risk, but areas where we'll take a closer look through the audit, so they're listed. Nothing out of the ordinary, or it's pretty much standard for all municipalities. And then last year was our first year doing the audit, so we had recommendations. And so as part of our year-end audit, we'll look at those points and see how we were addressed, and then we'll report back here. Materiality, so we need to identify what's material amount for the audit. So we use 2.5% of revenues, so approximately 780,000. If this number changes, we'll let you know, but we don't expect to change. The fees are as agreed in our request for proposal back in 2018, so unchanged in that front. You might see a difference from last year's because now we've allocated here PDR in the library, so that's why you'll see a difference. It's basically just the allocation of the 3 fees. In the appendices, you have more details on the strategy, our engagement letter, independence letter where we confirm we're independent, responsibilities, our responsibilities, management's responsibilities, as well as council's responsibilities, and then some resources, so that could be relevant to management as well as for you. So it's not just accounting, there's different topics. Je sais pas si y a des questions sur ou des choses que vous voulez qu'on regarde dans l'application.
Membre du conseil, y a-t-il des questions? Councilor Tunowski?
The risk of sounding uninformed, I just had a question on materiality. 2.5%, is that standard for, is it, well, I guess 2 questions, is I'm sure it's standard, and is it on my side or just average? And then my other question is, 2.5%, is it specific to departments, or like is it just overall revenue? So, would it be, I guess it's always based on 2.5% regardless of department, is that right? So,
yeah. So basically for the first part, the range is 1 to 3% for materiality. For municipalities and with public sector organizations, it's based on revenues, right? Because that's what you bring in and that's what you have for to spend. We use, as a firm, 2 to 3%. So for nearing at 2.5 is in the middle of the range. We're not comfortable going to 3% because last year we used 2 being the first year, so that's why we just raised it a bit. As far as what it brings, it's for us to calculate our number of samples. So just for the statement of financial position, and then when you look at the income statement, we do a lot of control testing, so that wouldn't affect it, and then it's basically for better analysis. And it's on all the statements as a whole and not department by department.
thank you.
Good question. As in previous years, I believe you have when this is going on, some members of council are contacted to see if they have any questions or concerns. So just so council aware that you might be contacted by our auditing firm, just so.
And vice versa, if you have items you want to raise to us, just call me or send me an email as well. It goes both ways.
D'autres questions du conseil? Non? Quelque chose d'autre à ajouter, M. Godin? Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Merci.
Item B, revision to templates of reports to council, report CAO 02/2020. That council received report CAO 02/2020 dated February 3rd, 2020, and accepts the proposed report to council templates as outlined in this report. Monsieur Leduc.
Ste-Marie, bonsoir, membre du conseil. So this responds to a need to review these reports. They've been in place since 2008. Also, during the year last year, council has asked me a few times what did my signature or even Mr. Godin's signature on the report mean. So we've defined those. Also, we wanted to also show to council when some reports have an impact on asset management or on level of services, that the department head does indicate to council what's the impact of any decision if it touches that item. So the reports also were to meet the accessibility criteria, which software should be able to read through a report in one language only. That's why we have to transfer those. In my report, I do say I don't know how we'll be doing that in council chamber. Speaking with the clerk and the mayor last week, we will still be producing on the screens the bilingual version. So this is something we'll have for the public because we could not project over two screens. So there'll be a working out period for sure as far as how does it go. And we still have to work with iCompass, which is our service provider that sends you the council's package. So that still needs to be worked out, but as of the next meeting, you will start seeing some reports, if not all reports, meeting this new template regarding what's in there. So I want to make sure that council was aware of those, and also there'll be a warning note on the French version that the English version is the official version, same as our bylaws. So that's why this beware notice has been put on there just for protection. So if council member was to have a number, for example, $100 in English and $75 in French, well, the English version will be the predominant one and the exact one. So that's how we work in the reports. So hoping this new reporting, even though it adds a bit, if they're all copied, I would say it adds more paper to the package. But if it's all electronic, it's a little more memory space. But that's basically all that's there. And from the Director of Finance, again, the report, he will only be responsible of verifying or validating that the information based on the budget or the appropriate bylaws that are tied to finance. So he's not going to be approving the report from the perspective of a report, but certainly financial data only.
Specific to his department.
Yeah. So hoping those criteria now maybe help as far as what is everybody's role. And again, it's a responsibility of the department head to have the report fully complete, and it's will be them answering to the issue as to if they're missing information or not.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Leduc. Conseil Larry.
So, two things. The first one is, we'll talk financial implications. So, Mr. Godin is signing off on the report, and it says the financial benefit of this project is $1 million. And through the discussion that we have at the table, all of a sudden we realize it's 500,000. Then did Mr. Godin reviewed the math and make sure that it actually was a million, and therefore I need to talk to Mr. Godin about it, or is it the person who did the report that made the error, or is it both?
Monsieur Leduc.
I would say in this case both are responsible to their responsibilities regarding providing information and the verification of it.
Okay. And then my second question is for you, Mr. Leduc. So in your section, if I read correctly, you said you're either in or not in agreement with the recommendation based on the content of the report. So that you're okay with the project or you're not okay, but in terms of the actual validation of all the information in it, that's not what you verified. You verified that the recommendation is to proceed with X, and you agree that we should proceed with X, but you haven't necessarily validated that all of the steps were taken to go through the whole process. You rely on your staff to do that. Is that accurate from what I'm reading?
That's accurate, yes. They'll be liable, or not liable, but certainly responsible of providing the complete information. If it's not there on paper, then I can't say I've verified it. So I'm basing my report on what's written on the report.
Okay. So are you circling in agreement, or are you circling not in agreement, or is there going to be a separate box that says yes?
No, the report will be written in agreement or not in. It won't be a checkbox. It will just be written like that.
Okay. Thank you.
And also, I forgot to mention something, Mr. Mayor, I'm just gonna say,
Oui.
there was some council members have been asking some department heads regarding which report was circulated to whom. So there's also a section here that confirms if this report has been circulated to others for the participation of information or validation. So you see that in the report also. So that's new information again that's shared with council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leduc. Conseiller Ternowski.
So we're adding also a section on strategic plan update. So I just want to confirm, so that'll be in all of them, it'll just tie into the strat plan, is that correct? Any of the projects or ideas, how it ties into the strat plan? Just to clarify, so we have one for strat plan and also one for the annual business plan. So
Yeah.
they're both going to be always there?
Mr. Leduc.
They've always been, they're already there right now, so they're remaining. I just clarified how it's going to be spelled out in the report that it's referred to, but it's already there right now. The business plan and strategic plan are there in the current reports.
Okay, but they're always there, and then when
So
we
if
talk
it's-
about strat plan is 1922,
Yep,
and business plan is annual.
I know, exactly.
Any other questions? I like the fact that we're adding the asset management component and the level of service component, because, it helps to clarify for members of council what are the impacts of our decisions. And it allows the administration to clearly indicate that for us, and we really understand clearly when we're making a decision that if we're adding, some kind of infrastructure, well, asset management wise, this is the impact, and what will be the impact on the budget next year by making a decision today. So I appreciate that information. No further questions, nothing to add, Mr. Leduc, we'll move on. Item C, authorization to execute a subdivision agreement, report PD 08-2020. Questions, comments, members of council? Anything to add from the administration? No? Okay. Move on to item D, authorization to execute a subdivision agreement, report PD 09-2020. Again, same thing, members of council, any questions? Councilor Associate?
Well, I didn't see a map or anything, but is there a proposed park or green space in that subdivision?
So through Mr. Mayor, yes, there is this park that is provided, and it was provided as part of phase one of the proposal. It's not built yet, but there's a park that represents the 5% of the overall subdivision. So you see those phases, one like 40 lots, 20 lots, but the calculation of the park was done as the overall square footage of the entire land.
And this will be where the large pond is located in that area?
No, it's north, it's
Okay.
in Mélanie subdivision, and I believe it's in close to 1 acre property that is reserved for park.
Yes.
So we'll see that.
Yeah.
Conseiller Brisson?
Okay.
On avait-tu fait finalement qu'il y avait un lien qui se faisait à une trail, ou s'il n'y avait pas, entre le parc puis le parc qui va avoir autour du pont?
For Mr. Mayor, again, there's a sidewalk on the North Central, the extension.
Ouais, juste le chemin sur
Yeah, but there's no,
No, directly. People have to take the
on the
pedestrian,
sidewalk.
on
Yeah,
the sidewalk,
yeah,
the pedestrian right there.
yeah.
Good. Perfect. No further questions, we'll move on to the next item. Item E, zoning bylaw amendment, report PD 10-2020. Property owned by Mélanie Construction, vacant land situated on Misty in Russell with the Sunset Flats Phase 3 subdivision. Questions, comments, members of council? Anything to add, Madame Tremblay?
I just want to go back, I believe that you were talking about the Russell subdivision?
Yes.
Okay, but the previous report was for Brun.
Mhm.
So this one, you could see in the map where the park is located.
Okay, I didn't. see
Yeah,
that.
so the proposed, is the zoning amendment. So you could see where the R1AH is to R1H. And on the right side, there's a rectangle block facing the extension of the street. That's where the park will be located.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just want to clear that up.
Yeah.
Parfait. D'autres questions, commentaires? No? We'll move on. Item F, council remuneration bylaw update, report FS 01-2020. The council received report FS 01-2020 dated for February 3rd, 2020, and approves the first reading of 1 proposed bylaw updating the council members' remuneration and expenses bylaw, and 2, the proposed bylaw updating the honorariums for non-elected members of committees and local boards. We had extensive discussion on these items previously. I know Conseiller Lorrain has some more items he wanted to discuss since we have the remuneration expense bylaw open. So I'll open the floor to members of council if you have questions or comments. Conseiller Brisson?
Juste une question que j'ai déjà été demandée, puis juste pour clarifier, parce que là, on propose qu'il y ait la piste pour tous les membres des comités, mais il y a juste, ben, il y a 4 comités qui reçoivent, mais il y en a 2 plus officiels, là. Il y a juste planning puis accessibilité, que les membres reçoivent 105 $ comme qui est proposé pour
Oui,
les...
si je me rappelle bien, M. Leduc peut vous corriger, mais essentiellement, c'est pour les membres qui ne sont pas payés, eux autres, ils vont recevoir un walking pass. Les membres qui sont payés, eux autres, ils ne vont pas recevoir un walking pass. C'est ça?
Ah, ok, c'est de classifier. Okay. Mais l'autre question que j'avais eue, c'était justement pour quelle raison que ces 2 comités-là sont payés, mais pas les 2 autres qui reçoivent rien dedans.
Bonne question. Je ne sais pas si on a une réponse. Il y avait Conseiller Lorrain?
I believe I know the reason that was told to me anyway is because they are required under the Planning Act and under the Accessibility Act that those committees are formed. So I think that's the reason why they were to be remunerated at one point in time. That's the only thing that separates them from the others. The others are all just advisory committees to council that are created by council, whereas these ones are requirements, I believe.
Planning, I believe, the minor variance, I believe, is required, not the actual planning portion, just the minor variance. But accessibility definitely is. But the library board is another mandated board. Is the library board paid? No, I don't believe so. So, yeah,
That's why I
whatever
was-
reason, at one point in time, decisions were made to pay these committees, and
That's why I was just asking, because I did have that question, and if it was...
I don't think there's any specific reason why. You know, it was done in the past, and I don't think we have anybody with corporate memory to answer that question. Okay.
You're looking at me.
D'autres questions, conseiller Ternaski?
So just about how how it's written for penalty for missing 3 meetings without being authorized by council. So is the assumption that I can miss more meetings if authorized?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand. So the authorization would negate the penalty clause? Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. In the municipal act, you could actually go more than, you can't go more than 3 months missing meetings unless given permission by council. So council does have the right to give, to validate absences, if you will, or that can be done by council.
C'est pas juste moi. Il faut que ça soit une motion passée.
Yes, if I'm talking in regards to the municipal act, more than 3 months, that has to be a resolution by council. But, you know, I don't think in the way the bylaw is written, I don't think it says that we need a resolution from council for approving absences, for example.
I think we should clarify that.
It needs council approval.
For more than 3 months?
No, for
Three meetings.
three meetings.
Three.
That's what it says.
Yes, but I'm stating, it doesn't necessarily have to be a resolution of council. If council is all in agreement, yes, we would motivate this absence, do we have to pass a resolution for that? Or we can just give a direction of council. Has to be approved, we can clarify whether it's a resolution or not. Mr. Leduc?
Yeah, I think it's written, being authorized, not necessarily by resolution, the direction would be fine also, but again, if it needs to be clarified, we can clarify that if that's something to clear. Reason why I wrote that is because at the last meeting, Councillor Lorrain had suggested, what about if I'm sick, or what about it's inclement weather? Let's say I'm taking a train from Toronto this afternoon, I'm planning to be here at 6 o'clock, so I have not excused my absence. Along the way, I have bad weather and the train stops in Kingston. and I can't make it to the meeting. I was planning to be here, and weather stopped me to being here. So would council penalize a counselor for that reason or not? That's why I wrote it this way, so that council has always room to discuss, and decide if it was serious enough or it could be excused, of the absence, sometimes out of control sometimes, so. That's why I wrote it this way for discussion purposes, and it's for council to debate if you want that or not.
Okay. Councillor Canasi?
I'm open for the discussion, but I think we give a buffer of 3 meetings for a year, and that should cover those. But I'm open for discussion on that.
Councillor Eli?
I'm just making sure no one else has any, because I have a lot plus my questions, so.
Go ahead.
Are we good?
Yep.
All right. So before I go on to all of these, I looked at all of the information, and I guess the question I have is, what is the reason why we're trying to penalize members of council for missing meetings? And then I look at it and I go, how many times has this been a concern? Why are we spending any time on this? It's been a concern one time. There's been one instance since this whole bylaw section was implemented back in, I want to say 2010 or 2011. So we've had one instance of us ever implementing that clause. Now, let's look at the
Just
opposite side of the clause.
Just to clarify, it's been one instance at the level of 5 meetings per year.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Now let's look at the second piece that is being asked as well, under item 7. So we've got additional meetings over 27. Do you know how many meetings that there have been over 27 in each year in the last 10 years? Anybody?
Quite a few, I would assume.
Yes.
Right.
There's been significantly more meetings than 27.
Yeah.
So what we're in essence doing is asking for more money for meetings, and we're penalizing ourselves for nothing, because there's been only one instance, the way the bylaw was written before. I see no reason why we should even be entertaining either one of these options. They shouldn't even be in the bylaw, because they don't apply. We're wasting time on stuff. We're asking people to track stuff. We're asking finance to make adjustments to pay, when it's never been an issue. So we're making it an issue every time we talk about it. So to me, it makes no sense at all to have penalties for missed meetings, or to have increased pay for additional meetings. So just so everyone knows, there's been 95 extra meetings in the last 10 years. That's on average 9.5 meetings per year. That's $1,900 for members of council. It's $3,800 for the mayor, based on the numbers that are being provided, $200 and $400. And these numbers were provided by the clerk to me earlier today. So on average, 9.5 meetings at $200 a meeting. So for 10 years, that would have been almost $20,000 more I would have received in pay. And I would have been being, what, $100? Like, it makes no sense. I don't understand why we would do it. If we want more money, then just ask for more money. If that's the case, right? You ask for $2,000 more a year, and this goes away. So I have no ability to approve either one of those sections or endorse either one of those sections.
Okay, so let's deal with those two before you move on. I'll give my 2 cents worth. In regards to number 2, in regards to what's proposed, more than 27 meetings, I'm fine with going more than 27 meetings, but I think that many of the meetings that Councilor is referring to that we went above was 10, 15-minute meetings coming in for whatever the case may be. So for me, I would specifically state that if it's over a 2-hour meeting, then we can look at an additional pay. But if it's within, we've had meetings where you come in, you're here for 5-10 minutes, you vote on something, and often it's just, it's an item that doesn't require full council, we just require quorum, and it's, a landowner forgot to apply for something that's coming in, and So that's how you address the more meetings. I would think that that would address a lot of it. Conseil Tarnowski, you wanna say something in that regards?
2 cents. So, I agree with you on the more meetings. If they're substantial meetings where, you know, for example, in my personal case where I'm taking days off in my regular job to do that, I think it's only fair that those be somehow compensated for a 10-minute meeting before another meeting or something like that where we have to at least have quorum, where I'm not required to be there. If I can't be there, I don't expect that to add to the count. On the flip side, on the other side of that discussion that we're having, for me, the biggest thing in putting this more accountability is 3 meetings as opposed to how the way the bylaw is written right now. My biggest aspect to that is that I find it almost insulting that bylaw the way it's written there. And so I'm happy that we're making ourselves more accountable. If you feel that it's not, if as a group we feel that we shouldn't have it and it's a waste of time, then I'll entertain the idea of not having a bylaw rather than having one that's so loosely written that quite frankly, it's an insult to our residents and it's an insult. To me, it's like, it doesn't have any teeth, so why even have it? So either not have it or actually put some teeth to it.
Okay, thank you. To that regard, I'll continue with the comment I wanted to make in that is Councillor Lorraine. You made a comment in regards to you don't even know what's the point in having it. That it's never been used. Well, if it's there, then it shouldn't be a problem for any of us. If it happens so infrequently, we shouldn't have a problem putting it in place. It's when somebody starts abusing things, then it becomes something that can be used. I hope to God that it's never used, but at least having something to hold us a little bit to account. Because I agree with Councillor Tarnowski in regards to it has no teeth. You know, a member of council essentially, you know, $500 is what a councillor makes per meeting, a mayor is $1,000, you know, in that ball game. So if you're penalized $50 for not being there, you know, you still make $450 for not being at the meeting. I mean, at the end of the day, the Municipal Act states what the role of council is, and that's the role of council, is to be at these meetings. So if we're missing meetings, that's when I find there should be a penalty, and I think it should be a penalty that deters people from missing meetings, because that's solely what our job is.
The only small comment I want to do is for the penalty, like we call it, whatever. It's just that it's easier since it doesn't apply to anybody. So it's if we don't need, comme si on n'a pas besoin, tant mieux. Mais que là, c'est juste que c'est bien plus facile à mettre ça là. Puis que là, si quelqu'un commence à avoir des problèmes, de dire, oups, on l'a fait une pointe, dire, ah ben c'est à cause qu'on l'aime pas, ou quelque chose comme ça, qu'on a une amende plus sévère que ce qui est là. Fait que moi, j'ai pas de problème de l'avoir comme ça, comme que dire, comme pour la pénalité. L'autre, comme on dit, tant mieux, c'est pas utilisé. Mais que si ça vient qu'à un problème, c'est là, tu n'as pas à dealer avec l'autre conseiller qui est dans le problème.
So here's my final comment on that point, and then we can move on to the next ones. Is council members are accountable to the taxpayer, not to the rest of council. And this is making us accountable to each other. And that's not what we are here for. We are here to serve the public. And if the public don't like the fact that somebody doesn't show up to meetings, then they will vote them out in the next election. It's up to the taxpayer to worry about what I'm doing, what Councillor Sosi is doing, what Councillor Brisson is doing. It's not for the table that's sitting up here to hold others accountable for their positions. Right? None of us are, we are all elected officials by the public. No one is each other's boss. We hold ourselves accountable for the position that we hold. So if I miss meetings, or if Councillor Sosi misses meetings, or the mayor misses meetings, then it's up to the taxpayer to step forward and not vote us in again the next time. I find that, you're right, I find that we agree. The number that's in there right now is ridiculous. It should never have been in there, and to my opinion, there should never have been a clause put in there. And there was a specific reason why that clause was put in there, that I'm not gonna get into right now, but there was a specific reason it was put in there. And it had nothing to do with accountability. So that's my piece on that. If we're keeping the penalty in, then I'll move forward with my other comments.
Conseil Brisson?
Moi, le seul commentaire que j'ai à redire là-dessus, l'accountability, oui, on l'a, mais c'est au bout de 4 ans pour l'élection. Que on a été élu, puis que le conseil, ils ont une responsabilité aussi que tu ne peux pas arriver ici, même regarde le dress code, on a demandé d'avoir un certain dress code. Ils s'attendent le reste d'être ici. Fait que c'est juste un contrôle un peu qu'on fait pour nos citoyens qui ont voté avec ce mandat-là de dire OK, ben il y a tant de réunions, puis on s'attend qu'ils participent à ça. Fait que s'ils veulent l'enlever, c'est pas problème, mais je peux rien que dire personnellement que je pense pas que ça fait aucun mal de l'avoir. On ne devrait pas avoir même l'avoir à discuter sinon comme ça.
Merci. Just add one last point to that is that there's examples of nearby large municipalities or cities that are having some similar issue where members of the public would be ecstatic that the council would have rules in place to deal with a member of council who's not been attending. So, I mean, yes, we're accountable to the taxpayers, but we're also taxpayers. And we're here elected to put what we think is in the best interest. So, we've dealt with this issue, we'll see where it goes with the reading, but if you had other parts you'd like to discuss, Councilor Butler?
I do. So now we'll get into so in the penalty section under section 6, where it says in order for the absence to be authorized, I would like to know what the definition of authorized absences are. And if that'll be brought forward, because I think there needs to be some sort of definition as to what a council will reasonably accept as an acceptable reason for having missed, that will be excluded from the 3 regular council meetings that are in section 6 above.
You're looking for which clauses a council member can use to miss, right? Essentially, that's.
Well, in order for the absence to be authorized by council, the member of council must make a written request either at the previous meeting or the next meeting following the absence. Council's authorization shall not be unreasonably withheld.
Right.
So,
You're
as a
looking for-
council member, what are the reasons that I can bring to council to say, I missed this meeting because of this, I would like it to be stricken from the record, as per that clause.
Okay, so you're looking for further definition.
That's exactly what.
Okay, would you like to put some items out there, death of the family, sick child? I think that, even if we listed 20 items, there is a possibility that something would show up that was unforeseen.
Right.
But council, I think at that point in time could make a decision, and again, I would hope that council is not unreasonable with it.
So what's the definition of unreasonable at that point?
Councilor Tomasky?
So again, from my very limited experience here, I would not even have that clause. We have a buffer of 3, and then we don't have to play into that sandbox at all. It just simplifies the process. If I can't make a meeting because I have a meeting at work that I have to be at, I don't want to be put in a position where I have to try to argue. I'm okay. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not fulfilling this part of my responsibility. Or if I'm stuck in a car because of an accident or whatever, that's just my opinion.
So you would suggest just to take that clause out?
There's a
together?
buffer of 3 in the year, and we're at 20.
Right now, we have
Like
20
official meetings here.
official meetings. We have, I believe it's 20, Madame Camille Laflamme, and then we have had the public meeting for budget and 2 budget meetings, so we're at 23. In a normal year, we're looking at 23 meetings, so it's a buffer of 3 or 4.
In 2019, we had 31.
2019, we had strategic plan on top of that. And again, how many of those meetings were 30-minute meetings?
Can't tell
Anyway,
you.
so if we're looking at a 10% buffer, like minimum. If we had 30 meetings, 3 meetings is a 10% buffer. I'm quite comfortable with that.
So, Mike,
So your suggestion is don't take, it's a 3, but it's a 3 buffer, and anything over that, doesn't matter what the excuse is or the reason is, it's just, it's 3.
That's correct.
Okay. Conseil Levin?
so now I get back to the 3 versus 5, because in that, if you're taking out that clause, now you've got some members of council who have full-time jobs. Those jobs require travel. They require alternate hours to be worked. You've got members of council who may have children with disabilities, that emergencies pop up. You've got sicknesses. So now you're saying 3 meetings, if somebody has to travel for work or has to stay late at work because they have a full-time job, this is a part-time job, that if they miss their 4th meeting they miss, they're gonna start getting penalized money, even though they will have done all the work, all the prep work, asked all their questions, answered every question from the public, but because they're not sitting at this table at the time that the meeting starts, that now we're gonna start penalizing them. I would also say, at that point in time, you know, we talked about participation. I heard the word participation earlier, participating in a meeting. Are we gonna start looking at how many words people speak and how often they speak on subjects? Because I've been through many meetings where there's council members that sit here that aren't speaking, that don't speak, that fall asleep, that are playing on their tablets or their phones or their computers or whatever. So just because you're sitting here doesn't necessarily mean you're participating. Right? So now, that's my comment on that piece.
Did you, Councilor Janowski?
Just to clarify that when I originally brought this up, the penalty was quite a bit higher than that, and it didn't even represent the actual value. So the penalty that we have there at $200, if you look at your pay in terms of time that you spend doing your job as a counselor, it doesn't represent, it only really represents a bit of time here. It doesn't take into account everything else you do. If you look at the value of your time and the amount of hours you put in doing this job, responding to emails, preparing for these meetings and everything else, $200 is not, it's not like, it doesn't represent, you know, like 1/20th of your salary, is what I mean by that. So that's for one thing. And secondly, you brought up a point about, I have a full-time job, and so if I'm not able to come here, why am I being penalized because I have a full-time job? I agree with you, I have a full-time job too. But if I have a full-time job and a part-time job, and I can't do my part-time job adequately because of my full-time job, I don't expect to get paid for my part-time job for that particular week. I shouldn't expect to get paid for that part of that part-time job, for that meeting that I didn't attend. Why should I get paid for it? I feel that's wrong. That's why I'm happy with no buffer whatsoever. You know, like, oh, sorry, we have the 3 buffer, but after that, it's like, I have no problem with that. I'm happy, if you give me a penalty of $200 for a missed meeting, I'm still getting paid adequately for preparing for the meetings, for responding to emails, for going to events, and so on. I'm perfectly happy with it.
Thank you very much. I'll just add one point to that is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never had or have seen anybody where they have a part-time job and they miss work and still get paid for that part-time
You
job.
can't add a regular part-time job out there to what we do here. So stop comparing it like
Well,
that.
you're the one that uses
It's not the
part.
same thing. It's absolutely not the same thing. This is an elected position. We're governed by the municipal act. It's not like the regular person that's working at your grocery store, working part-time, and they don't go to the work so they don't get paid. It's completely a different situation.
But I think Councillor Karnowski has a good point. The impact of the penalty that's in this bylaw is very minimal to what's required, because the role of council is to be at the table to give direction and make policy for how we run this municipality. And if you're not at that table to help make those decisions, then you're not fulfilling the role of council, because that's what it is in the Municipal Act. It states clearly in the Municipal Act, it is the role of council to be at this table and make those decisions and implement those decisions.
And if I miss 3 months, I get kicked out of my seat.
Conseiller
Plain
Brissot.
and simple.
L'autre point que je voulais amener, c'est qu'on vient de parler que sur les conseils, les comités consultatifs, qu'on a même 100 $, mais si tu y vas pas, tu l'as pas. Tu n'as pas de buffer pantoute à ces comités-là. Ça fait que c'est pas pire que là, qu'on a même un buffer de 3, l'autre, t'en as pas pantoute.
I don't get paid. You don't get paid your $50 honorarium on that committee either if you don't show up.
Ben, c'est ça que je viens.
So it's not
That's-
comparable to this.
Oui, c'est la même chose.
No.
L'autre, tu n'es pas
Yes.
payé pantoute. Ça fait que l'autre, faire la même chose différence. Au lieu de dire, OK, tu as 4 meetings par année, au lieu de dire c'est 100 $ par meeting, que tu as 400 $ par année. Mais quand que tu n'y vas pas à un des 4, tu n'es pas payé pour. Ça fait que si tu vas à 3 des meetings, tu n'as pas de buffer. Tu vas avoir rien que 300 $ dans ton année. Tu ne vas pas avoir ton 400 $ et que tu n'as pas présenté à un meeting. Fait que ça revient à la même affaire. C'est juste que sur le comité, comme c'est là, c'est marqué par nombre de meetings, mais on l'a mis aussi à part de ça que là, c'est même pas, ça équivalait à quasiment 500 $, même un peu plus, que là, il y a 200 $, c'est même plus bas que ce qu'on a loué. Fait que le comité, tu ne l'as pas non plus, ton chose. Fait que c'est la même affaire, que tu sois sur le comité ou que tu sois ici. Pourquoi que quand tu es sous le conseil ici, que là, tu n'as pas la même, comme une pénalité, là, t'as même, comme je disais, tu n'as même pas de buffer. Fait que ça, c'est tellement bon.
Merci. Councillor Alain.
So I'm hearing that there's 3 people that are going to vote in favor of this anyway. So I'm going to move on to a different piece of it. I believe under the, Mr. Dickey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but under the Municipal Act that was changed last year, Bill, whatever the bill was, I can't remember, 68 or something.
168.
What's that?
I think it was like 168.
160, something to that effect, that there was the ability to be virtual or remote for meetings. What would it take to have that looked at this council again?
Mr. Leduc, a direction from council to look at it?
That'd be the first one. But I can certainly forecast or anticipate a policy around how it applies, where it could be held, where can you sit and be attending this meeting. And also I would like to ask my IT department to see how do we have the current tools in our intranet right now to satisfy that need, and then report to council.
I believe we had attended a few sessions on this topic when it came up in regards to Amberley Gavel, the firm that specializes in municipal law. If I remember well, it was not recommended to look at this option. It was opening a large can of worms, but if council wishes to look at it, that's a definite possibility.
The Municipal Act allows it, right?
It does allow it, yes.
So, I mean, I can tell you, as someone who works full-time and who has to travel significantly from all of my roles that I've ever had, that almost every one of the meetings I missed last year, except for one, I could have attended virtually very easily, because I was in the other city. I could have been sitting in my hotel room. And in fact, if you look at some of your text messages, you probably see that I was watching during those times, because I had sent messages off at that time. So
Sorry, I don't keep my phone here at the
No.
council table.
once you got back to your phone is what I'm saying. I know you don't keep yours at the table. But what I'm saying is, the way the world is going, there's a lot more virtual type of scenarios that are coming. The work that I'm in now, we had a meeting on it today, same thing. People want people necessarily don't want to be face-to-face, they want to do it virtually, then no problem. That's what we're moving towards. The municipal act has now allowed for councils to consider it, and I think we should be considering it in those circumstances where a member could be here, but they're unable to be here because they're on travel status or whatever, then I think that they should be allowed to attend virtually.
Thank you very much. I think I understand the concept. The world is going in that direction. Mind you, in private business or, you know, in a setting where it's not a public meeting, it's a little bit easier. You know, I can just imagine having a meeting here and, you know, two members of council are away and we're holding a meeting with 3 and we're doing it on the phone. What happens to an instance where 3 people want to be away and we no longer have quorum in the room?
You can't not have quorum, right?
Well, that's correct, like.
As
this-
part of the municipal act.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but, you know, if we start permitting people to do it at a distance, I would be interested to see out of the 440 municipalities, has anybody implemented that? I think that would be the first question. Has anybody successfully implemented that? Councillor Janoski.
I'd just like to support Councilor Lorraine's idea. I think if, in this day and age, that, you know, except for the internal stuff that we do, where you don't want anyone to accidentally
And you
record
can't,
something.
and you can't, under municipal act, you can't do a closed session.
But for the other one, I think the technology is definitely there, and I would wholeheartedly support that as someone that also works full-time. That'd be fantastic.
Councillor Larry?
And in that vein, I would definitely believe in my heart that we would have to put something in there if we ever did consider it, that you can't just be at home and do it. It's in circumstances where you are unable to be here physically, not at home sick or not at home babysitting or something to that effect. It's because you're out of town for whatever reason and you're not in the vicinity and not to be used for just staying at home and not coming in. That would be the reasoning behind why I would want to see that put in place. And I think that would alleviate a lot of my concerns over the number of meetings, because I look at it that way. I think I've been sick once a year where I've missed a meeting, and I think there might have been a couple of times where my kids were sick. So, and I'm looking not just for myself, I'm looking for future councils and whatnot. So I would like, I don't know what we need to do to get that going, if I have to bring something else, or if we give a direction to look at it and bring something back to council under that. I don't know how we want to do that.
Councillor Sosa?
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with having the accountability over 3 meetings. I would support that. Just, I think it hasn't been an issue at this table. And I kind of also agree with Councillor Duran in, you know, it's very difficult to determine the authorized absences. But, you know, stuff happens, you know, and again, you have a serious illness in one of your children, something might come up. So there are cases where, you know, somebody's gonna be absent, and for good reason. I think we should just not dock them on that particular absence. But I don't have an issue with, you know, having something in place just in case it ever became a problem. I mean, there has been an issue before, and you know, so I don't have a problem with putting that clause in, but I think we should take the other one out about, what was the other one that you had said?
In regards to the clause for,
The additional meetings?
Yeah, that one. Well, it was determining, authorized absences, I guess.
taking that clause out,
Yeah.
we authorize that.
Yeah.
It's only a buffer of 3 and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
In regards to Conseiller Lorraine's request that Councillor Janoski essentially seconded that we start looking at the possibility of remote, attending councils remotely. Monsieur Le Duc, council had made the decision that we have some training sessions. And we had discussed possibility of bringing in outside consultants such as Amberley Davil, who are known to be experts in the municipal field. Maybe that could be part of one of the discussions after council hears what they have to say on the matter. Then we could give direction if we want to continue looking at that option or not. Because there are serious concerns, and I think that's probably why a lot of, I would say most municipalities in Ontario have decided not to touch this one with 10-foot pole, but it'd be interesting to see if anybody has. I'll say that.
At the same time, if we're gonna poll all the cities on that, can we poll all the cities on the penalties? Because,
That's been,
no,
No.
not all the
we
municipalities.
looked at 13 that were within that, and 11 of them said they didn't do that. And one of them was another one, so it was 1 out of 13 that participated in the study, said they had some sort of a penalty. But if we're doing it for one, for to not do a virtual, then we have to go the other way and get the information on the other side as well. Right? If you're saying, well, no one is touching that one, and yet no one is touching this, adding a penalty, but we're okay with adding a penalty,
Let's
but
be
we're not
clear.
okay with virtual.
We already have a penalty. It's already in place.
Right.
All we're discussing is the amount of the penalty.
And the timing.
And
So
how
there's
many,
multiple.
there's.
So we're reducing the timing and we're increasing the amount.
Yep.
So
And
you're
that's
making,
what's proposed.
you're making it tougher, but no one else is doing it.
No.
So if we're saying, go check and see how many people are doing it virtually, and we're saying, well, no one's doing that, then we shouldn't touch it.
No,
Well, no
what
one's
I'm-
touching the penalty,
What
so
I'm
why
su-
are we?
What I'm suggesting is that after we have the representation come and give an education session to council, if council still wants to go in that direction, and then we can give direction to the administration on to look at that item.
Is that actually,
Right?
that actually,
No, we had discussed that the training sessions would be
You'll have 4 this year.
for this year.
In the evenings, I assume?
That's your discretion.
Yeah. Yeah, we had talked the possibility of either starting a meeting earlier or coming in, or scheduling it as part of a meeting. That way we can make sure that, reports, if we have to cut back on reports, that can be pushed off to a meeting as long as we have the training sessions. Okay. Conseil Larry?
Item number 7, I won't support the additional funds. I don't think we should be paid for over and above what we're quote unquote scheduled. If we want extra money, then we just go ahead and increase salaries instead of putting out additional funds for meetings. So I can't support item number 7.
For that clause, I'll suggest that we put a time, any meeting above 27 that is at least 2 hours in length. That way that'll avoid a lot of the meetings that we referred to, that we did a lot of extra meetings. Actually, most of them, I believe, were short-term. So I would recommend that if council is in agreement that we put a 2-hour period on that. If we have to come in for more than 2 hours, fine. If we have to come in for less than 2 hours, then there should be no extra remuneration. That's my suggestion. Is council okay with that? One, is that okay? No?
I would have said an hour.
An hour.
no, give that to I didn't work, an hour and a half.
What's the
Well,
difference?
Okay.
Well, that begs,
No, but an hour is a meeting.
so that begs a question. What is attendance at a meeting? Right? Somebody, if I'm sicker than a dog, and I know I'm on my 3rd strike already, and if I miss tonight, I'm on my 4th. I come in, I'm sick, I sit down, we call the presence, and I leave.
Which
I
has
would-
been
I
done in
was
the
here.
past.
So,
But is that, okay, are we talking about the additional?
No.
meetings or- then that just-
I'm talking in general, because I don't support 7, so you guys have all supported it that way, so that's fine. But in terms of a meeting, what is considered a meeting? Do you have to stay until the final buzzer goes? Do you have to spend half an hour to be counted as an attended meeting?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because we have had issues in the past where members of council are showing up and staying for a short period of time and then taking off, right?
Full meeting.
We've all seen. So you're saying that members of council should be here for a full meeting. If they're not here for the full meeting, they shouldn't be counted as attendance, is that correct?
Again, based on my limited experience, when I come here, I'm here for the meeting, or more than 90% of the meeting, I don't know, something in that, if you need to put a timeline. I mean, I know we've had some meetings where we're here till like midnight, and I was getting close to maybe leaving, but.
So I'm just saying, there's.
No, I really appreciate Councilor Lorraine's wanting to like really fully kind of encircle it, and that's the idea behind this concept, is to have all these established before we're stuck, before we're in it.
Right,
And
because
that's
this is
where-
just a first reading
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah, well, no, but also what Councilor Brisson said, you know, it's good to deal with it now when we don't have a problem. And so it's good to like iron everything out beforehand. I'm all for that. We put a percentage of the meeting, you know, you have to be here for 85% of the meeting, or 90%.
Any suggestions? Yeah, I have 90% on the table. Going once? Anybody else? 90% of the meeting, is that adequate?
No, I think anything over 50%. I mean, because the person could be here and all of a sudden they do fall ill. Maybe they ate something bad. Maybe they get a phone call from their spouse saying that there's an emergency at home,
I agree.
right? So,
Yeah.
but I don't want somebody coming in
And just being.
and being in attendance and leaving,
Okay. So,
right? Like if that's
so at least 50% of the meeting? Is that fair?
as debated by time or as debated by items on the agenda.
No, if the meeting
Right.
takes 4 hours, you had to be here at least 2 hours. If it took 2 hours, you had to be here at least an hour. So you had, time-wise, you had to be here for 50% of the meeting.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, we're good with that.
Including closed session?
Yes, yeah. From the time the meeting starts to the
I'm
time
just-
ends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
and
I
it's
can see
right, because
myself,
we
I'm gonna
have
be
seen
here
that.
sick
What if
right
somebody
now?
has to catch a
Okay,
flight?
okay, I
So
gotta
they
go.
can't stay past they can stay for the meeting, so they've done their business. Now we're in closed sessions where you don't pass resolutions. They would have stayed for more than 50% of that other meeting, right? 100% of the regular, but then that closed session can go for 3 hours. Now they fall out of that time frame, right? It happens. I just wanna make sure that.
If it happens, I'm happy not to be paid.
Yeah, and I think realistically, for most of the meetings, we know well ahead of time, we know a year in advance. So we should be able to schedule our schedules around.
No, not necessarily.
And I agree with Councilor Lorraine, like work is work.
Like I could find out tomorrow that I have to be on the road at the next council, for the next council meeting. I could find out the Friday before, right? That's just the nature of, there could be an issue. I have to fly out and I'm gonna be there for 3 days. I missed the council meeting because of it, right? For planned events, absolutely. Like, I'll give you the example, tonight, normally in my old job, I would have been in Vegas tonight, because that was the conference every year. Was on this month, I'd leave today. So that was a plan, that would be planned, I know in advance I wouldn't be here. But if my new job, if they told me I had to leave, had to go to Petawawa tomorrow morning, or today, I couldn't be back to the meeting. So, that's nothing I could do about it. So just making sure we understand.
So 50% of the meeting, everybody seems okay with that? Okay, next item?
Yep. So now, I think we're done with the requests that Council Ternowski had asked about. Am I correct?
I believe we've addressed them all. Yeah.
So now, in terms of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and again, it's a lot about defining what things are. Because there's either silence or ambiguity in the bylaw as to what we can and can't do. So I want definitions put in place. So just as an example, item 16 talks about, item 16.1 talks about entertainment expenses and transportation costs which are non-related to municipal business are not eligible for reimbursement. So what's considered municipal business and what's considered entertainment expenses, and it's at whose discretion? Full stop. right? Is it up to the mayor to decide on his own accord what is conducting municipal business and what is allowable entertainment expenses if it is a relatable municipal business? Because my definition of something may be totally different than yours.
We haven't come across that issue in my time anyways, but can you give me an example?
Absolutely. So I attend a charity function, and I give an item for the silent auction as a counselor supporting my constituents for that event. That's an entertainment expense, and I'm there on municipal business. I'm representing myself as a counselor at that event.
So,
Would that item that I purchased be expensible?
we've had that discussion in the past.
Yeah.
It's been decided no. I wouldn't clarify that as an entertainment expense, so you were talking about a donation.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
It's an event. See, that's, your definition of entertainment expense is different than mine,
Right.
right? So in here, there's nothing that speaks to that donated item that says you can't approve it, and there's nothing in there that says you can approve it. So it's silent on the issue. So if it's silent, who chooses which side it goes on? I think it's okay because it's silent. It says, like, it doesn't say I
So
can't do it. You say it on the other side.
Right, so you would like the ability to state what you want to do. So state what you want to do, and then council can have that discussion if we want to put it in the bylaw or not. You want to be able to give donations
Yes,
from your discretionary budget.
correct.
My opinion is that the discretionary budget the council has should be used, in my opinion, should be used to improve your job as a member of council. So either training, going to conferences, things that will help you do your job better and not necessarily make yourself look better in the eyes of the public. That's my opinion.
See, my opinion is, I'm out there supporting local events. The public expect elected officials to be at these events and participate in those events.
100%.
So-
And if the event you went to was a charity and there was a price of entrance, that would be covered.
Correct.
But to give a donation, well, if I go to an event and I want to give a donation, I'm giving it out of my pocket, that's my choice. But I don't think we should be taking taxpayer funds to make ourselves look good in the public eye by
You're
giving
there
a tip.
supporting a local event that's going on.
Yeah, you're attending the event,
So-
and council, and we're buying a ticket to attend the event. I think that is your participation, that's what expected of us.
See, and
It's
that's
not-
where we both agree to disagree on the actual interpretation of the non-reimbursable expenses in this clause. That's why I want definition, because it's not defined.
Okay.
There aren't proper parameters in place right now, and I know we had a huge discussion about it last time, where we were talking about cash donations and other things like that, and we had a whole list of things all put in place, and then it fell by the wayside.
So you would like to add a clause that permits you to give donations from your discretionary account?
I actually want to add a clause that says I can use my discretionary clause any way I want to use my discretionary clause, like it was in my first term of council, and I'm accountable again for what, $3,500 to the taxpayer. And if I can't spend $3,500 reasonably, then they should be able to hold me accountable for it. That's how I feel. We have a budget that what was our budget this year? Over what, $30 million, $50 million, and whatever the number is. We're responsible for that, but yet my hands are tied on a $3,500 discretionary budget.
Okay, well, let's hear what
So-
other members council. You have two various opinions on this case. Conseiller Brisson?
La seule chose, je suis pour un peu des fois, de dire, OK, avoir un prix quand on a une salle d'action que tu aimes, parce que soit tu peux pas être là ou que j'aime ça, tu peux participer. Première chose, il faudrait que ce soit au nom de la municipalité et non à ton nom personnel. Mais l'autre chose, c'est que si on alloue de choses de pouvoir acheter des items comme ça veut dire que tu vas à un event, comme un trivia night ou quelque chose comme ça, puis il y a une live auction, puis tu décides, ben, je n'ai pas été à aucune conférence pour présenter à la municipalité, je me suis pas acheté de linge, je n'ai pas été à aucun cours, j'ai 6 000 piastres que je peux dépenser, ben, il y a de quoi, ben, pour bien paraître avec mon nom, je vais mettre 2 000 piastres pour de quoi qui en vaut 500, pour pouvoir battre cette chose-là. C'est le danger qui peut arriver, selon moi, de dire on alloue des donations autres que le prix d'entrée, puis le transport. Que quelqu'un en abuse de cette manière-là, de dire, ben, non, c'est une donation que j'ai faite en mettant dans le live auction, ou même le silent auction, que j'ai racheté de quoi. Oui, si j'ajoute, quand que je vois une activité, puis je vois une silent auction, que je vois ça, puis que je le dépense, je le prends de mon argent. Puis
I think you're missing what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can use your discretionary funds to purchase items at the event.
It's
I'm
the same.
saying you purchased an item to donate
Oui.
at the event to be auctioned off for that event to make money for the charity that's being presented. So I just want to make sure we're clear.
Ouais, c'est ça.
There's a huge
Je fallait
difference.
dire que ça peut avoir la différence, mais si on viendrait à décider qu'on pourrait, il faudrait que ça soit au nom de la municipalité, selon moi.
Ouais.
Okay. I think that, a compromise is if members of council want to be able to give donations, then we all take $500 from our discretionary budget, we put it in a pot, and we give, and we allocate 5 walking passes from each of us, if that's something council wants to do. That, you can give a walking pass, it's, because we're talking about events inside the municipality, we're not talking about events going outside the municipality. That being said, you're risking, this should not be, and the donation would be, I agree with Conseil Brisson, where it comes from council as a whole. It doesn't come from an individual council member. And we don't have a ward system here. We have at-large. We all represent everybody in this municipality. Again, I come back that I don't think we should be using municipal funds to make ourselves look good. Because at the previous term of council, we had the issue where council had made the decision that we start carrying over our funds, and then in the last year, a council member could find themselves with $8,000 in unused funds. Hey, great, election is coming up, I'm gonna give a lot of donations this year, make sure that we look good. I don't think we should look at, anything that is given out should be coming from council as a whole and not an individual member of council, at the very minimum, in my opinion. Other comments? Councillor Sosi?
Well, I kind of agree with Councillor Moran that we should be able to manage our discretionary budget. I don't have an issue with making a donation. I think before you had said one time you wanted to donate something to the dome. I think, I forget, correct me if
I think it
I'm
was a
wrong.
gym pass and an annual walking pass, and I got absolutely obliterated at the table, so, for asking for that.
Yeah. So I don't have an issue with that comment.
Councillor Tarnowski?
I'm in the same vein on that in terms of that kind of discretion, but I would want some sort of caveat where, like, I just don't want to be in that position where one of us buys something at a silent
Yeah,
auction
yeah.
with that money and say, oh, it's my discretionary income, I'm supporting this fund, because that to me it becomes like
Taking it home.
yeah, so it's just kind of the, if somewhere it says we can't benefit from it, but then I don't know if that's gonna work either, because sometimes we buy, say, I don't know, Coke, I'm benefiting because I'm not freezing, you know what I mean, like, so, I don't know. I'm kind of halfway in between there. We should have some checks and balances, but again, I go back to Councilor Lawrence's point, if it's, $3,000, I mean, we are responsible for a $50 million budget. I don't know.
So would we be comfortable with taking $500 each from our budget, put in a pot and giving out passes? Would that be reasonable? Is that a good compromise? Because we're encouraging the municipality the use of the dome.
Yep.
And it's not taken away from the department because we'll be taking it out of our discretionary budget. That's one suggestion. Conseiller Brisson?
Sauf que, qu'est-ce qui arrive, comme tu sais, c'est à ces événements-là, c'est pour ça qu'on a des choses de community grant, qu'on a des choses qu'on peut leur demander à community grant. Puis là, ben, si ça a été demandé, mais que ça a été décidé au conseil, que pour une raison ou une autre, non, on ne va pas supporter cette chose-là, mais que là, toi, tu arrives personnellement, puis tu achètes de quoi pour, tu overrule un peu ces choses-là. C'est pour ça, moi, je dis, c'est comme, s'il y avait à avoir un cadeau ou quoi que ce soit, tu dis, ben, tu dis au groupe, au lieu de venir à moi pour moi, dans mes dépenses personnelles, au groupe, dis, fais la demande au community grant, puis là, eux autres, ils vont pouvoir décider si on te donne une passe pour le don ou comme ça. Mais si la chose, moi, je décide que le grant, comme mon discretionary, je vais l'utiliser surtout pour des conférences et tout ça, puis souvent il y en a, ben, si j'en reprends, ben, c'est pour ça que l'autre, c'est un community. C'est pour ça qu'on a des grants, des community grants, pour donner de ces choses-là, pour les supporter, que ce soit avec une passe ou tout ça. Qu'on soit plus ouvert, peut-être, pour donner des passes pour ces choses-là, ça, je serais pareil, mais passer par le processus du community grant, pour moi, c'est mon expérience.
Conseiller Lorrain?
Just to respond to Councilor Brisson, we would take a complete rewrite of the community grants process to be able to allow that, because right now it wouldn't allow them to assign them a walking pass for that type of event. So I would take a rewrite of the community grants in addition to the community grants. For me, if we're gonna take $500 from our budgets, then why can't I spend the $500 any way I want? You put rules in place, I can't give cash, I can't purchase anything, but I can support events. I don't see what the problem is. If I'm gonna put it into a pool, then, you know, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, anytime that I ever did that in my first term of council, it was always to support a local event that I gave. So what I would normally do back then was I would buy 4 weekend passes to the fair, which is a local event, and I would donate those 4 passes under my discretionary budget, and I'm supporting not only the fair, I'm supporting the actual event. So it was a double support of an event in the community. But to me, if I'm gonna put $500 into a pool of money, I don't see how I can't spend $500, right? If I have, even if we put parameters in place, no cash, can't actually purchase items, you can't pay for something that's come through discretion, through community grants, those types of things, I have no problem with it. But there has to be some discretion to what we do in our positions. I mean, you look at other, and whether they have a ward system or not, you look at other municipalities, they have the ability to do that. They do support their events in that way. And under this bylaw today, we can't take money from here and put it somewhere else. And we've done that in the past as well. So I don't want to get into that position. I would like to, if we're set on $500, so be it. Set it at $500, and I'll propose that for the second reading, a list of things that you cannot do under entertainment expenses, I guess it would be, or whatever clause else you want to do under this, and says, here's what are things that you can't do, like you can't get a cash donation, you can't buy a silent item auction or an item auction, you can't buy them at the event and use your discretionary funds, and you can't participate or you can't put money forward that was a rejected request at a community grant previously of council. So you put those 3 in there, I think it actually captures those items of concern that we've just talked about, and it allows the council members their own discretion at $500 of a $3,500 budget on a $50 million municipal budget. I think I could spend $500 reasonably and be accountable to the taxpayer for $500. So that's my opinion. I think I'll propose some stuff if that's.
Yeah. I think the only clause that I would add, or if it's not part of your choice, what you propose is that any donation that's given is from council as a whole, and not by an individual councillor.
My comment to that is if it's come out of my discretionary budget, then it should be from Councillor Lauren, because it's coming from Councillor Lauren's discretionary budget.
Yeah, and that's.
I don't agree that it should be from
And
all
that's,
members of
and that's
council.
where I have an issue, where we're using municipal funds to essentially make ourselves look good. That's my point. Okay,
So move on to the
next
one.
item.
I don't know.
So where are we going?
He will propose something for the second reading.
For a second, we go. So under section, now I guess it's under 18. I thought we had corrected this, or updated this the last time. And it says, the above expenditures will be reimbursed to the claimant only after the claim is duly authorized. I thought the term that we used was signed by the mayor. Because again, I would have concerns over what is the criteria that are set forth for the mayor to approve or authorize those items.
Mr. Rudzik?
We apologize that we didn't keep the track change. We accepted that before they were all passed. It would be easier to follow what's been changed. We're just validating if it's been changed or not.
C'était dans le previous bylaws.
It's a supervision.
On peut mettre les cartes avec les fractures.
We could probably show up on the screen the current bylaw so that you can see what's the wording there. So maybe it's going to confirm it's there or it's changed.
It may be there, I don't know if it's been changed, but I thought that we had changed it 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, when we did the changes to the bylaw. There was a lot of confusion on that.
Madame, Camille,
I can confirm that the previous bylaw, the 2019-088, that's how it was worded.
the claim is duly authorized by you with the mayor or designate.
Okay,
So you would like to change the duly authorized to sign?
to signed by the mayor or their designate. Because you're not approving them, you're not authorizing them, you're signing the receipt.
Right,
To get
and
paid.
I wouldn't sign anything that I wasn't comfortable with. So
Right.
I mean, I think
But
it
not-
comes,
no.
it comes down to the same thing.
But that's the thing, it's not comfortable, no, you can't, that's where I get concerned, right? Because
Well, if-
whether you're
if-
comfortable with it or not makes no difference, is whether or not it's allowable under the policy.
Well, that's what I'm saying, if it's not allowable, then I'm not signing off on it.
Right. But what's not, and then that's where we get into this whole,
Duly authorized by either the mayor or his designate. I mean, if you wanna change the word duly authorized to signed, I don't think it makes a difference for me. If it's not something that's allowed in the bylaw, I won't sign off on it.
right, and then it'll come to council.
Right, which I think has been the practice that we've had.
Right.
The signature authorizes it.
What's that?
The signature authorizes it, otherwise.
Authorizes the payment, not the transaction. There's a difference between the two, right? And the mayor just proved it with, well, if I don't feel it's allowable, then I'm not gonna authorize
If
it.
it's not in the bylaw, then why would I sign it? If it's not authorized in the bylaw, why would I sign it?
But there's whether or not it's silent or not silent on that issue. Which comes down to the same argument of the donation thing. It doesn't say I can do it, but it doesn't say I can't do it.
Right.
You wouldn't authorize it,
That's correct, and then you would.
and then I would
read
have to come to council with it,
Yep,
right? And that's why I want more definition around what can and can't be done, because you shouldn't have that discretion. It should be black or white.
So-
And right now, that would be great.
Yeah, but that doesn't change that part.
no.
I think it does.
If
It's
it's
not
clear,
authorized.
if it's clear in the definition of a donation like you're proposing, then if it's in the bylaw, then yes, I would sign off on it.
Right. You would, but I wanna make sure for other councils going forward that it's not a discretion to the mayor to authorize or not authorize. Right? They have to follow the policy, whether they
Right.
feel it's okay or not, doesn't matter. Is it in the policy or
And
it's
if-
not in the policy? One or the other. If there's discretion there, then to me, there's a problem. And I'm not saying that you won't authorize something, I'm saying other councils may not. And we have to look at this, not just for us, but for people going forward.
If you wanna change the wording duly authorized to sign, I don't think it changes much, but.
I would like that changed.
Doesn't matter.
That's my thought on that
I
one.
don't think there's, it's splitting hairs on the
I
wording,
support it.
so.
Doesn't matter.
Monsieur Leduc,
I think there is a difference.
Well,
there we go.
By being authorized by the mayor, it may mean that there could be some discretion that the mayor can do or not. If it's just signed, if it's not written anywhere on this, then it has to be brought in front of council for authorization. So that's why there's a difference between authorized and signed. So you can have a small difference in value or whatever. You can tweak with interpretation, say, well, I'm gonna authorize this. And you could go through without being questioned. But if it's only signed, you're gonna have to see, is it written somewhere here? If it's not written anywhere, then you're gonna have to bring it in front of council for authorization.
so we
Right, because like Councilor O'Neill stated earlier, the entertainment expenses. Are we going to start listing every single entertainment expense possibly? Because then the way you would change the sign, I would look at it and say, well, that's not listed under entertainment expenses. I don't have the authority to authorize it. It's only if it's there that I sign it. So it's having it, you can't go to one extreme when it suits you and not the other, that we have to find a balance. And I think duly authorize it, good point, Monsieur Leduc, that it does give some flexibility to be able to look at it. And again, if the mayor doesn't authorize it, the council member always has the right to bring it up under council member items to the table and have council make the decision on it.
Well, here, does it say that it would automatically go to council then for,
it says
it says it will be referred, so if you were to refuse something,
Then it
based
would-
on your interpretation,
Yep,
then it would automatically come to the council table for review.
yes.
Is that my understanding?
Is it coming automatically, or if it's the person that did ask for it, that
Well,
it
it says,
comes?
the way it's written, if none of the above signatory authorities authorizes the expenditures by providing their signature, then the expenditure will be referred to council for approval. So I would think that it would be the member of council, if he can't get approval, would go see the clerk, say, I cannot get approval for this, please put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
It's just the example, I say, the councillor arrived with a donation that said, no, it doesn't apply the way that that's why I was asking, that it was automatically that going to the council, or if he said, okay, the councillor said, no, I understand what you mean, so I don't have to bring it to the council. It's my choice to bring it or not.
Yeah, so, well, it's essentially by the mayor or his designate not signing off on something, then he's throwing it in the lap of the council member to bring it to council for approval. Mr. Leduc?
Again, I think it goes even further than that. That there's a conflict of interest or a conflict of personality between council member and the mayor. And finance department gets a copy of the request. It's there written off clearly in the bylaw, it's allowable, and the mayor's playing hard at it and not want to sign it. I think that either the CEO or the director of finance or the clerk probably could just bring this motion because it says it will be brought in front of council. It doesn't mean by whom, either the requester or anybody who's witnessed this could bring it to front of council. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, but it would be, if the mayor or the designate doesn't sign off,
Yeah.
then either the mayor informs staff, I'm not signing off on this, or the member who says, and it would be brought back. I see you got it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And we talk about entertainment expenses, we talk about, it says municipal business related, right? Or non-municipal business related. What is municipal business related? Because I can tell you, I speak to a lot of people, and I'm sure that, other people do all the time. I could be at a hockey tournament in Toronto, and somebody starts talking to me about a bylaw, or they start talking to me about their fence situation. Well, I've just talked municipal business. Do my expenses for that night or that trip become expensible?
Yeah, I would say no. Monsieur Leduc?
Right, but you haven't defined non-business related.
Well, that's where the word authorized comes into play. It could be allowable if the mayor felt, or whoever signing authority felt that it was related, long enough, significant enough for you to justify an expense. That's where the word authorize could come in and say, well, I'm gonna authorize that for you because you did advance the business of the corporation. If you only signed, and if it's not there, then you would not be able to sign it. So that's where the trade-off here is,
It's in
authorize
the-
gives you leniency, or it gives you
little bit
authority
more.
to change, more room to wiggle. So that's where the definition is clearly cut, then the mayor has a definition. If you don't agree with it, then you go in front of council and say, I want it to be enlarged, or tell the mayor that he needs to sign off.
So duly authorized has a little bit of flexibility. If we put his signature there, then unlocked. The mayor is locked and he won't be able to sign off unless you define every single possibility, which is not what we want to do in a bylaw.
See, and there's been instances at this table, there's been instances in other councils where the mayor and other members of council don't get along. And I find that this could be a situation that causes problems and brings more stuff to the council table for others to have to deal with than you know what I mean, just because of personality conflict.
We haven't had that issue.
Well, we have. It's caused part of this whole problem. Not with,
Well,
not, with,
I've
not
never-
with me and you.
No, but I've never
But-
been asked, I don't think in my time here in this position that I've ever had a council member bring something to the table that they wanted me to sign off on that I didn't. But there might have been the instance where they asked me, would you sign off on this? And I say, no. And then that purchase doesn't happen. But I haven't had an instance where that issue has been raised. Councilor Janoski.
So we have a process and we have a backup if you don't want to sign on it.
Comes to the table.
Comes to the table. So there is a process, there's a backup. So even if there's a conflict between the two positions, there's still a backup. And if the conflict persists and if the person has to keep coming in front of council, it kind of looks bad on the other person too. I don't see that being a long-term problem.
And even if there is a conflict, the majority of council make the decision. So, next item?
No, I think that's all.
That's it? Any other, anything else? Members of council? Anything to add on the administration on this subject? We need some direction, clarification?
Well, my understanding of it is that we could probably suggest to council in the second reading, for example, the 16I, A, B, or C. You could choose, for example, different formats, and council can decide which one wants to select or remove, because sometimes I have not seen clear direction right now as far as in or out. But until we present you a document or a written statement, you can't really vote on it. So we could come up with some options, and council, when he sees option A, B, or C, then you'll have to stop and say, either it's a D or E or F
Right.
to add, or at least adopt one of those three. That's how I see it, because right now there's been sometimes clear and sometimes uncertain position by council on different items.
By Councilor, you indicated that you're going to be submitting your points to the clerk as what you'd like to see.
It would be a separate item under, I guess, under 16, I guess what, 16.4. And it would be the ability to spend $500 any way the council member feels that, whatever, I'm not using the right term, but the council member can spend up to $500 of his or her current discretionary budget, annual budget, discretionarily, if that's a word, with the exception of these items cannot be purchased, or this activity cannot be supported under this clause. And it would be stuff like cash, purchasing items in a silent or live auction, approving or paying for an event or an item from an event that had already been declined at the community grounds. So that's
Okay,
what
so-
I'm looking at.
So that'll come in the second draft. Then those, but okay, so we have, it's open, we have a first reading for the two items. Now, Madame Camille Laflamme, just to make this easier or possible, if the two items that are there, if the council is okay with these, can we vote on these two items, get them approved, and continue having the bylaw open for the other items? Is that a possibility? Or do we have to reopen after, because we're approving two items, But does that automatically mean we're closing that bylaw and then we have to reopen? Because we've given notice tonight, right? So this, the suggestion.
I gave notice last meeting.
Yeah, but
So-
the items that Councillor Lorraine would bring up, the bylaw would be open for approval, next, because I don't wanna find ourselves in a situation where this item is approved by council, this item is approved by council, but every time we bring it up for a second and third reading, we keep hashing this over and over and over. So I'm trying to figure out maybe what's the best way to move this forward. Any thoughts? Mr. Lizu?
Well, one thing is you'd have to pass an amendment to the bylaw,
Right.
for sure, for those that you want to adopt, right? Now, the passing of this amending bylaw, would that constitute closing of the noticeable motion? That'd be my concern.
His,
Yes,
not mine,
yes, it's true,
right?
Right.
Because we gave two separate notices.
yes.
Yes.
So whatever Councilor Tarnowski raised, and you would like to close that, you could probably address those in an amending bylaw. But again, we're still on notice for a secondary amendment.
So if we voted on these two items tonight and we decided to do a second and third reading and pass this, next meeting, the suggestions and the changes that Councilor Lorraine is bringing can be brought forward for first, and if the council
First, second,
decides.
and third,
First,
just do it
second, and
all.
third, and council decides to pass all those, then we can do that at that point in time. Is that correct, Madame Kennedy Laflamme?
The only thing is, this way, right now, we were repealing everything and started with one bylaw. If we go, we adopt this one right now like this, then we amend, so it will be an amendment.
Right.
It will not repeal again the same thing and start. So we'll have maybe 2 or 3 amendments.
And it's only an amendment
For
anyway.
that,
Yeah, so
for that bylaw.
the bylaw would still be open at the next meeting for amendments. Those amendments are made and then approved if council so chooses.
But it will be a couple of different bylaws that will be in effect, not only one at that time.
Okay,
See, that's,
okay. Are we okay? Are we okay just,
I think we passed this one tonight, we passed the amendment on the next one, only because if someone's in agreement with this but not in agreement with the other, or vice versa, then they're gonna have to, I'll use me as an example. If I don't like the ones that were being proposed already, but I wanna propose the ones mine, then I gotta vote in favor or against,
Okay.
right? Or of the bylaw, it's in full at that point in time,
Mr. Lizer?
so.
For example, 19A, I reworded it to reflect now that it's not part of our policy. Last time it was worded differently, okay? So we should only consider items that were part of Councilor Tarnowski's elements. This 19A new wording cannot be adopted right now.
Should wait.
So we have, well, just read exactly the wording here. The council receives report FS 01-2020 dated February 3rd, 2020, approves the first reading of 1, the proposed bylaw updating the council members' remuneration and expense bylaw, and 2, the proposed bylaw updating the honorariums for non-elected members of committees and local boards. So are you saying there's another change that's not listed in this resolution?
No, I'm saying that 19A, for example, is just a rewording, or sometimes the words are clear, the misspelling, whatever. Normally, we don't, if you adopt a new bylaw, like the clerk mentioned to you, then all these changes are included. But now if it's only amendments, then you only have to particularly mention section this, section that, section that.
Non, mais qu'est-ce qui est présenté au conseil?
Ouais.
That's what we would be approving tonight if it was approved this evening.
As a
like that.
Yes. Yes,
As
everything.
is. So that would, any changes that were made, that's getting approved.
Mhm.
So if we pass that, then the next time around, these items of discussion cannot be brought back again because we've decided on those items. And if we just do it as a first reading at the next meeting, while these are still on the floor, we can rehash all of these all over again, which is essentially what I'm looking to avoid on these two items anyways.
That's clear.
Councillor Lorraine?
Yeah, can I just have confirmation of what the track changes look like? Because if the only thing that was in this agenda package was this as presented, and I didn't see, like, if you're telling me there was wording in 19A that's different, I don't have that track change view of it, so I don't know what I'm approving. So there may be other sections within this, and I can tell you that other councils have had issues lately of not seeing the whole picture and approving stuff, and I wanna make sure that we know what we're approving. Outside of the request from Council Tarnowski.
What is that every day?
Yeah.
Now, they may not be substantial, but I just wanna make sure I understand them.
Yeah.
Donuts.
On est-tu de commencer?
Yeah, that's the fact sheet.
Right. So there are track changes in this document, correct? Okay, so at this point in time then, what I'll suggest is that we do the first reading tonight. We bring it back next week with all the track changes available for members of council to be, or in 2 weeks' time. So council sees exactly what the track changes are, so that we know exactly what we're approving. They might be, they might be very minor, but council has to be aware of what the wording is.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So then, for this one, when it comes back in 2 weeks, it'll be for second and third reading, and then it'll be what, first, second, and third reading on the changes that I'm proposing as an amendment?
I think,
And I only say that because I'm not in favor of some of this stuff, but I'm in favor of my changes, and how do I vote if they're all in one bylaw?
yeah. Monsieur Leduc?
That's where staff could make a recommendation to either have a second reading only, or having second and third, and council decides, no, we're just strike out the third, and we'll say we're just ready for a second reading right now, and give further direction regarding a third reading. That's right, that's your full discretion. So, for us, it doesn't matter if we're writing second or third, council decides which one wants to pass, second or both of them.
Right.
Right,
And
but
I-
it doesn't address my issue.
No, but what can address your issue potentially is that, as Monsieur Leduc stated earlier, we do a first reading this evening, it comes back as a second and potentially a third, but it comes back as a second reading and say, okay, this is the first change, this is the second change, this is the third change, fourth change, so on. And then a registered vote could be done on item 1 and 2 where a member of council votes against those changes or in favor. And then we take each item individually, and at the end, we vote on it as a whole. So knowing full well that when you vote at the end, you've already either won or lost your vote on each specific item.
We could do that?
Well,
You could ask for every.
it's more of a direction of council to say, is the majority agreeing with this option, for example? And then, as you go along at the end, you have how do you feel personally overall, if you are satisfied with the overall bylaw, you vote
But
for or against?
these essentially, what is being proposed are amendments to the current bylaw, correct?
Yeah.
Right? And on any amendment, we can have a registered vote. So you could say on item A, this is what's proposed, we have a registered vote on that item B, that item C, that item D, that item.
Right.
And then, once those amendments are all voted on, then we'll vote on it as a whole. So you might
Right.
find yourself where,
Well, you might find yourself in the same situation where there's one or two items that you don't like.
right, but we've already voted on that item and made the decision. So yes, I can stay there and say, well, just because I didn't get my vote, I'm gonna throw everything, but that's like the budget, right? There's things in the budget you don't necessarily like. Are you gonna, play nice and say, you know what, I don't like 1 or 2 items, but overall, I support this? You could do that way, or you can say, no, I vote against the whole thing. Because I didn't get this one item I really wanted, so. Councilor Tarnowski, then Conseil Associé.
Alternatively, could we not just vote on the amendments, and then next meeting, review the bylaw with the track changes and the additional proposals? That way we wouldn't be looking at any other changes other than the amendments tonight. And then we can really have the time to look at the track changes for any other little minor changes that were done.
you wanna vote on these two items tonight, not the track changes, and the track changes come by in the
That's
next.
just another option.
So what happens when we amend the bylaw?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if you wanna go ahead now and approve the bylaw as is now, and then you're talking about track change between this one and the next one with Councillor Lyons.
So my suggestion is that we do, tonight, we do it as a first reading. Next time it comes with all the track changes and the recommendations, and then we take item by item and
So
we
you
vote
mean
on-
the track changes from the last one or just from tonight? That's my question. Okay. You want everything?
Right,
Okay.
so we won't fully close the bylaw tonight, we're not voting a second and third reading. Everything will come back at the next meeting, and then we'll, hopefully, the items that we've discussed in detail from what was proposed here, we'll just have the vote, and then we'll move on to the next items. If it needs more discussion, have more discussion, or just vote on everything.
Okay, but there won't be like a registered vote for each item. It's a registered vote for either the whole bylaw or an amendment to the bylaw or.
But that's
or
what I'm
you-
saying, any amendment, you can ask for a registered vote.
Yes, if
So
it's
there
an
might be-
amendment to the bylaw,
So,
yes.
so everything that's being proposed is an amendment to the bylaw. So everyone will have a registered vote. Just giving you a heads up. Counselor Associate?
Well, I was just wondering, would it not be easier just to defer it to the next meeting, and then we have a chance to look at all these things in the meantime, and then?
Well, essentially, a first reading, it is, in essence, a deferral. We're not giving it a first, second, and third reading, we're just doing one reading, and it's moved, it comes back at the next meeting, and at that point in time, we do a second and third, or second and then the third, so. I think that's the easiest way, that way, everybody sees exactly each item, how council voted, it's transparent, there's a full record of it, and we'll base our decisions at that point in time. Okay, we're good? Let's take a break. We'll be back in, at 8:00.
Fait que c'était pas celui-là qui disait track au bout.
Oh non, moi j'ai pas touché les ceux des. Ça c'était les
Toujours à
anciens.
ces deux-là.
Non, moi je les ai copiés puis je les ai pas renommés, ça me laissait pas.
OK.
Parce
Là,
qu'il était trop long, le document, pour
Je
renommer.
voyais qu'il y en avait plein.
Ouais. Non,
Je
c'est
savais que
juste.
ça viendrait.
C'était le même qui s'appelait, puis je l'ai juste copié.
Puis là, on pourra plus le déménager là, ça.
Ouais, c'est ça.
OK. Bon, on l'a pas perdu, c'est ça.
Management.
Là, ils n'ont pas parlé du deuxième encore. C'est ça, ils n'ont pas parlé du deuxième bail encore. Ben oui, parce que dans sa recommandation, on a les deux. S'ils veulent l'en changer à first, second, third, s'ils n'ont pas de questions, puis ils n'ont pas, on peut le mettre en track change là, s'ils veulent.
I have a question for you, maybe you can answer it now, get it approved. Honorariums and other payments, like to committee members, etc., are they taxable benefits? They are.
Before the issue.
Okay, on recommence. Welcome back, everyone. Just to come back into this discussion, the honorarium, I can never say that word properly, that's under the committee bylaw for the walking passes, so that could be approved tonight if members of council are okay with that. Did we need discussion on that for giving out the walking passes as indicated in the changes? I believe that was indicated as a first reading as well, Madame Camille Laflamme, so we'll have to, when we get to the bylaw, we'll have to make an amendment to say second and third reading, or you prefer we do it right now?
Well, we'll have to separate the resolution first,
Right.
so that we can say that the first part is as is, but the second part will be for second reading
Okay,
in the recommendation of the report. And then in the bylaws, yes, we'll have to add.
okay,
First
so
and-
this item F, removed from the
Yes.
consent items. Conseiller Brisson, conseiller Lorrain.
Ça serait juste pour bien s'assurer de M. Godin que c'est imposable à nos membres, ce montant-là, parce que ça, vu que ça peut être remis comme si c'était de l'argent.
Monsieur le Duc, Monsieur Godin, ça fait une différence?
Merci, M. le maire. Honnêtement, je crois que non, mais j'ai une note déjà prise cette question-là juste pour le valider. La valeur d'une page, je crois que c'est 75 $. Donc, ça se pourrait que ça ait un impact par rapport aux impôts. Mais je pense pas, mais comme je t'ai dit, je vais pouvoir valider cette question.
I guess the question would be, even if it was imposable, would that make a difference if we're giving the pass or not?
C'est juste qu'il faudra le mentionner.
Ben, c'est mentionné quand on donne le pass, si le membre du comité dit non, je peux pas badrer, je suis pas obligé de le prendre, il se fait pas payer, puis that's it. Conseiller Lorrain?
And it's $100, it's $70 or $75 annually for a walking pass?
Yes. So potentially he's looking at 75 plus the cost, taxes, I guess, would be, the value is $86 or something, so.
For the year?
For the year.
Okay.
So potentially if it is taxable, then he'd receive I guess he'd receive a T4 from the township every year for the value of the walking pass. And T4, yeah, so.
I didn't know how much it was for the year, because I was saying, well, somebody who gets paid on the committee wanted to forego that to get a walking pass, there's only $79 or
Yeah.
whatever it is, and they're making $106 a meeting, it makes no sense.
Right, so we're okay with that? So that will, Monsieur Godin?
Merci, M. le maire. Donc, just to clarify, so $75 is actually a student and the senior rate. It's $100 for an adult.
Right.
Annual.
Yeah.
Plus tax, so, but at the end of the day, the question is, would we change our mind because it's taxable or non-taxable? So if we're okay with it, we'll move forward.
Is there a staff rate?
Right?
Is there a staff rate?
No.
Staff, it's on our staff rate,
That's
9%, so it could always put BJ down.
If you're gonna impose, then you consider staff.
You're working good.
Well,
We'll see you later.
Did I miss something either in the remuneration bylaw or in the honorarium bylaw about, I thought there was a discussion of council members, their meeting prices going from 50 to 105. Is that in
That
here
was-
somewhere?
That's
In
in
the
the
one-
first discussion we had.
But we didn't mention it though. There was no discussion about it.
Well, I simply asked if there was any questions about it, nobody had any questions about it, they were fine, at least, I assumed you guys were fine
I
leaving it.
didn't even hear that, so.
C'est là que j'ai demandé si, c'est pourquoi que, c'est pourquoi qu'il justifiait s'il y en avait d'autres comme qui en payaient autant.
Okay, that'll be brought back at the next meeting, as one of the items. I'll tell you right now, I would suggest that, I think that the chair obviously has more work to do when it comes to a meeting as a second member of council. I would suggest that the chair be at 105 and the secondary member, if the committee just stays at 50 and be done with it. But that'll be a suggestion and discussion we can have next time around. Okay, we're good? So it'll be separate. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Item G, the extra paving report ISPW 01-2020. Did members of council have any questions in regards to item G, the extra paving? Conseiller Brisson.
Moi, C'est juste que quand que je regardais ce rapport-là, cette parcelle de chemin-là, c'est à peu près une des meilleures en brun. Fait que moi, qu'est-ce que je proposais à la place? Ça serait qu'au lieu de paver ce bout de Saint-Augustin-là, qu'on prenne cet argent-là pour, parce que Groove a déjà été approuvé, mais il restait 1,2 km à paver, qu'on pave à la place pour finir ce chemin-là, 1,2, de finir Grove, jusqu'au chemin Marionville. Puis, l'autre chose, c'est que, l'autre suggestion que j'avais aussi, c'est que le chemin de 200 serait la même chose à 200 de Boundary à aller à Hamilton, au lieu de paver celle-là, qu'on finisse la rue 500 jusqu'à South Nation, South Russell.
Mais ça, c'est-tu sur quelle liste qu'on parle, là? Parce qu'essentiellement, il y a deux listes.
Oui.
Il y a une liste que c'est le plan proposé tel que dans le rapport du consultant. Puis il y a une autre list, which is essentially roads that aren't anywhere on the first list. So are the roads you're recommending, are they on the second list? Because that's what council had decided, was that the extra $120,000 was going on the second list.
Qu'est-ce qui arrive? C'est un projet. Qu'est-ce que je suggère? Il y a deux raisons. Ce
Non,
projet,
je veux juste clarifier. Tes suggestions sont-tu sa deuxième liste ou sa première liste?
je l'ai vu sur le tableau qui était fait pour 2020, mais juste en remettre en gravier. Puis j'ai dit, au lieu de le mettre en gravier, d'aller en...
Okay, so you're suggesting that we take the money that council has put aside for the second list, you're suggesting that we take it off that second list and we put it on the first list?
Ouais.
Okay, I just wanna clarify, that's what you're suggesting.
C'est juste mon point de vue en arrière de ça, c'était que quand que t'as un chemin, il devrait être servicé sur le même, il devrait avoir le même level de service. Comme c'est là, si tu regardes Grove et la 500, il y a un bout qui est pavé,
Oui.
puis l'autre petit bout qui est en gravier.
Il y a plusieurs chemins comme ça dans la municipalité.
Mais c'est pour ça que je dis, dans ce-là, on a déjà approuvé avec le budget une bonne partie de Grove, le 3/4 de Grove, puis la moitié de la 500. Fait que je me dis, ben les machines sont là, mais aussi ça se met le chemin de toute la même catégorie de service.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is, ça va augmenter le niveau de service
Pour un petit bout.
pour un petit bout, mais il faut comprendre qu'il va avoir un impact sur asset management, qu'à place de réduire l'asset management, we're increasing the deficit on the asset management side, just to be clear.
Comprendre, mais c'est l'utilisation du chemin qui va être pour l'entretien. Parce que l'entretien, par exemple, c'est que le gravier, il faut que tu en remettes relativement, mais c'est à planifier quand même qu'on dépensait 60 000 dans 2 ans pour mettre juste du gravier, que quand là, qu'on peut en dépenser 77 000.
OK. Monsieur Bourgon, as-tu des commentaires sur cette suggestion-là?
Merci, M. le maire. Donc, présentement, le plan fait pas mention des changements de gravier à un autre type de surface. Donc, comme vous avez mentionné, M. le maire, c'est augmenter le niveau de service. On change complètement le type de surface. Donc, il n'était pas quelque chose que le plan avait regardé nécessairement pour ce type de transfert-là. Nous, notre recommandation était vraiment d'aller sur des chemins qui sont pavés, mais qui ne seraient pas adressés dans le plan de 10 ans. C'est de là que notre recommandation, au moins au conseil, de concentrer vers des chemins qui ont un volume de trafic plus élevé.
So essentially, si je comprends bien, the second list that the township put $120,000, the council decided we were going to spend, you looked at that list and you said, where are we getting the biggest bang for our buck? And in your opinion, that's a section that you think will get the biggest bang for our buck in regards to how much people are actually using it, and all different sorts of criteria. Is that correct?
That's correct. So that's basically the appendix in the report. It's a collector. So that's the list basically of main roads that would not be addressed in our 10-year plan, and it's in the need of repair right now,
Okay.
as identified in our study this summer.
Right. Okay. Conseiller Laurent?
I'm gonna ask a silly question. We put $120,000 into the budget in 2020, 1% of taxes
Roughly, yeah.
to roads. Now, we talked about roads that are outside of the 10-year paving, whatever. 120,000 doesn't get you a lot, gets you some, doesn't get you a lot. Is now, and we know that 120,000 is in the budget going forward, right? You're gonna, every year, you're gonna have that 120,000, isn't it?
But
It's
it's.
1% of taxes.
Let's just be clear, that's what the report speaks to, is that next year, what happens to that 120? Are we keeping it aside for the second list? Or are we throwing it in with everything else that will go along the 10-year plan?
Right. So my assumption was that similar to the 1% that we put aside for the rec complex, that 1% now forms part of that budget every year, and it goes, that 1% goes into the fund for infrastructure, into the rec complex. That's what we put it into.
The 1% for the rec complex.
Yes.
But the 1% for roads, that's what the report is, that's what we're discussing now.
Right, so I'm getting to a roundabout. So my thought was, if over 10 years, you've got 120,000 per year, it's 1.2 million. Right? So why can't we do in 1 year, 1.2 million, knowing that we have that money set aside for the next 10 years? Because it's in the budget.
The tricky part with the report is that even though we're putting $120,000 into, I'll call it the second list, now we've increased the level of service on those roads, which has an effect of changing the asset management plan. We're actually, by doing those roads, we're changing how much we have to put aside for asset management. So the 120, if I remember well, goes down to, the value the next year would go down by $10,000. Right, so it's not, because you'd have to put aside $10,000 a year to cover the change in level we've done. Is that correct, Mr. Godin? Am I interpreting that properly? I know my numbers might be slightly off, though.
Yeah, you have a good understanding, basically. So by investing $120,000 in this case for the segment on St. Augustin, it would increase our annual requirement by $10,000 or $9,000 something. So essentially, our recommendation, and it's up to council, but what do we do with that $120,000 next year? Our recommendation was to keep that $10,000 in the other list, if you want, so that road becomes into that list where we maintain it at an acceptable level, at optimum life cycle cost, and that then there's $110,000 next year for the next road you want to bring up. So I don't know.
So, but with time, for every road we bring up, then that $10,000 will increase, and the $120,000 is slowly going down every time we increase.
Right.
Monsieur Leduc?
So that would mean the next year you put 120 plus 9,000 to cover your annual replacement plus your basic investment.
Right.
That's what
So
you have to do.
it increases, by doing this road, the 120 stays, but we already know that there'll be an extra $9,000 requirement in next year's budget to cover the asset replacement of this improved road.
Right. So my point is, instead of doing $120,000 projects every year, why don't we take 1 year and do the entire amount for 10 years at once? Right? Because you borrow against that money, because you know it's there, you've already put it in your budget. So it's that annual repayment amount that you have to add into your operational on the other side, that or asset management of 9,000 and as it
Well,
goes
it'll
up.
be more if we do $1.2 million project. So I
Right.
guess the question Councilor Alain has, correct me if I'm wrong, is if we're putting $120,000 aside every year for 10 years, that 1.2 million, taking asset management into account, would represent how large of a project? Would it be 800,000 or 700,000 or $1 million? Parce que le 9,000, c'était pour 120 000. Mais ça veut-tu dire si on le fait 10, c'est vraiment 90 000 de changement?
So call it $1 million, 200,000 into asset management and you get $1 million, do we do $1 million worth of projects, or every year do we do 100,000?
See,
Right?
I was looking at this report and I had an option D, which was the $120,000 that we put this year does a section of road and goes into the general fund. So it speeds up list A, which in turn, long-term, would go to B. And if we decide to do another % increase next year, specifically for the roads, then that 1% gives us $120,000. But your infrastructure fund continually rises as well. So the first year, the money we put aside goes for the second list, and the second year, that's in the general fund. We're doing more of the list, that's the priority for the 10 years. So we're speeding up the 10-year plan. And if council decides to add another %, well, you could do another 120,000 or 130,000 in that.
Then, in that case, I think my opinion is we just put the 120 into the general list right from the start and just tackle that 10-year list.
Speed up the initial list.
Speed up the initial list.
Okay?
Every year, if you've got that money put in there now, and if you want to add another 1% next year, you throw it into that general list, do more projects. Every year, you do more projects.
Yeah, and that in turn would address our asset management deficit. It's not increasing the deficit because it's continuously addressing the 10-year plan. Is that correct?
So that'll speed up, so something that's at 15 years may now be at year 9 because of the way we're doing it.
If we keep putting 1% every year specifically for roads, we're actually speeding up that list.
That's right.
That's it.
Huh?
No, so there's
That's accounted for.
That's counted for. Monsieur Godin?
Clean list.
Are we throwing a lot at you, Monsieur Godin?
I'm sorry, through Mr. Mayor, I'm just not sure I followed the direction you were.
Okay, so the 1% that we put aside, 120, what happens if we were just throwing that 120 into the infrastructure fund?
But do $120,000 worth of road work
Yes.
with it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's not going into it's not going into recreation, it's not going into other parts of it.
It's specifically.
Mr. Bogon, you can breathe. So it's going into roads.
It's just we're speeding up that first list faster.
Yeah, so I'm trying to make sure I understood correctly. So basically you're saying the $120,000 would go towards the road, the 10-year plan.
The
It would
new-
speed up the 10-year plan, and
Yes.
that appendix B that was presented, the list of roads that aren't being looked at in the 10-year plan aren't being looked at.
Aren't being looked at.
Until they come up due, whether it's year 12 or year 13, which now may be year 8 or 9 because we've sped up the other.
Yeah, by doing the first list faster, it'll eventually get to the list where we haven't done.
Right, because think about it, right? Because now we put $120,000 in more this year. Next year it's $240 if we decide to put 1% in.
It's definitely,
The year after,
it's the same.
it's $360 extra that we're putting in. If we put another 1% on top of what we did, just like we did this year. So that number keeps growing. That list is going to then be tackled quicker,
Right.
right? So we're gonna get to those projects. And I think, to me, doing just little Band-Aids year after year after year after year isn't going to fix the problem.
Right.
I agree.
So,
Comments, other members of the council? Councilor Kanowski?
So I would just say, one of my questions was, why wouldn't we do the priority list first? So I'm in agreement with that wholeheartedly. And I think, yeah, just going through the main ones as a priority first, putting that money. I like the idea of the B list when we're talking about projects that will probably never see light of day because of the amount of traffic they're getting. But if the argument's there, as long as we maintain an increase in infrastructure, then we'll eventually be able to get to this.
Right.
But at some point, we may have to discuss that, because based on the consultants, like, there are small roads where there's very little traffic that are in terrible condition, but there is very little traffic, so they'll never come up on our radar. But they should technically, at some point, be addressed.
Well, as we catch up on our infrastructure deficit, that will then allow us to continue looking at things that are normally out of the scope. Monsieur Bourgon?
Well, exactly. The list that is identified as a need of now, the more we increase our budget towards the 10-year plan, well, those roads will eventually be part of that list. The more we put money every year,
Makes sense.
well,
Yeah, stuff will be able to come
exactly.
up.
And that's pretty much what what the strategy talks about. until we reach the short-term financing of 2.3 million a year towards roads.
Okay. So it completely throws a wrench into the report, but that's okay. Conseiller Brisson.
Moi, c'est juste que pourquoi j'avais amené la position, parce que définitivement, de dire au monde de prendre le 120 000 puis de le remettre sur le bout qui est à suggérer, le bout, il paraît bien tout ça, ça fait qu'il est très beau. Moi, je disais, c'est juste que il y a ça, comme je prends l'exemple, justement, que je reviens à Grove, que je reviens à 500, il y a des bouts de chemin qui n'est pas explicable pourquoi que ce bout-là est en pavé, puis d'autres que c'est en gravier, que pourquoi que c'est une bonne erreur qui s'est passée avant, parce qu'il y avait eu des conditions. Parce que je prends l'exemple, l'autre 500, l'autre bord, en s'en allant vers Saint-André, la 500 de Ste-Marie à aller à Saint-André n'est pas pavé, il est en gravier. De Saint-André à aller à Sainte-Catherine, il est pavé, mais il n'y a pas rien à chaque bord de pavé.
Mais il faut regarder combien de maisons sur la rue comme telle.
Oui, mais il y a des fois, comme je prends l'exemple, pour la 500 à Marionville, c'est un chemin que le monde peut prendre pour descendre à South Russell, qu'il est pavé jusqu'au milieu. C'est pour ça que je me dis, ben, tant qu'avoir ce chemin-là, de la catégorie jusqu'à moitié, il fallait tout au complet.
Je comprends ce que tu dis, mais encore là, when we talk about asset management, la façon que toi tu proposes, we're increasing our deficit on asset management, but if we do what Councillor Lorrain proposed, we're actually reducing our deficit on asset management. Oui, il y a des chemins, et puis il m'a donné un exemple, Force Road. Why is only a section of Force Road done and not the other section? Because at that one point in time, council, there's only so much money to go around, and we've taken the opportunity. Force Road we put money in Force Road to what's the term I'm looking for, Mr. Bourgon? The surface treatment. We've made some improvements there, but again, that's when we look at those individual roads and we look at, okay, how much are we costing us operationally every year, and perhaps. Like McDonald Road, we looked at that road as well and said, okay, well, how much are we going to save operationally? And that's on a more case-by-case basis. But if you want to put a motion forward that we just pave every single road we have, well, then you're going to see our deficit increase significantly. Conseiller Lorrain?
So, I hope I didn't misspeak or be misunderstood. I'm not suggesting we go with the recommendation in the report, and I don't suggest we go with Councilor Brisson's recommendation to go with a different road. My suggestion is we put the $120,000 into the regular paving budget, and it goes to the next road down the list, where we could pave another $120,000 of that road, of that list,
So,
not of anything being proposed. So.
Right. Correct. So, Monsieur Bourgon, if you had an extra 120 on the list, where is it going?
Can I just mention one thing? If you look at the work plan for 2020, il y a un autre bout de la route 200 qui est identifié là, mais qu'on n'avait pas approuvé au budget.
So, Monsieur Bourgon, is that correct?
That's correct. There's a portion of the Route 200 that's planned for 2021,
No,
but we're
we-
currently doing assessments on the curves right now, so I wouldn't recommend to
No.
do those ones.
Il y en a un en 2020 aussi, qu'on n'est pas dans la liste. Celui sur route en 2020, l'avant-dernier, route 200, North Russell à AD. Puis même on l'a-tu, de Hamilton à North Russell, on l'a pas. Il n'est pas nulle part. Mais, parce qu'on parle déjà de boundary, mais l'autre est déjà dessus de North Russell à AD, mais tu n'as pas de Hamilton à AD.
So, Monsieur Bourgon, I'm not a roads expert by any means.
Ben non, mais c'est ça.
I would ask what you suggest would be the most appropriate, where the most beneficial to use that $120,000.
Je me demandais si on mettait avec l'autre, si on fait de boundary au lieu d'arrêter à de boundary à Hamilton, si on le continue jusqu'à North Russell.
Monsieur Lebrun?
Comme je viens de mentionner, on regarde aux curves dans cette phase-là. Donc, moi, j'attendrais, comme que c'est prévu en 2021.
Il est marqué ici en 2020. Ah non, c'est l'autre qui est marqué en 2020. Il y a l'avant-dernier, la route 200, North Russell to Eddie. Il est déjà dans ton plan de 2020.
We just request for a proposal for next meeting on how that 120 will be addressed, because just to make sure that we're getting the most bang for the buck.
So why don't we defer this one and have them come back with,
Monsieur Leduc?
Well, we have an issue with that because by
Tenders?
tomorrow morning, we have to tell a county who's in the tender which road, portion of the road is gonna be added to this year's paving plan. If council is ready to make a decision, if not, then we can't be able to tell the counties to include it.
Okay.
So I'm hate to put pressure on council right now, but
No.
we're a little pressured for the exercise.
Put up the next thing.
Fair enough. But Monsieur Conseiller Blisson is making a suggestion. Monsieur Bourgon, if you had the 120, where would you like to put it?
Well, I know that our pricing's a bit higher, but I would try to aim to do either Route 300 or Route 400, because we know typically those segment for that length, and the pricing that we had, like in the last couple of years, would match up to be about 120.
So, quel numéro ça liste? Ça liste en 2020 ou c'est dans
So,
2021?
2021.
Okay.
Donc,
so
this,
are everything being done in 2020? Or all these are being done in 2020 in the budget?
yes.
Non, l'avant-dernier est trop fait. En
Northwest.
2020.
Asset ID 1420, c'est ça?
Oui, 14-20.
So Route 200 North Russell to Eden.
Yeah, but we know why, right? Because he said he doesn't
Well,
want to.
there's portion of Route 200, yeah, for the curves.
Okay.
But for the amount of what we have, it would be the resurfacing of either, for in 2021, either 2630 or 4220. One of those two with the length and resurfacing would line up with one layer of asphalt being for the 120 at the pricing that we got this year. So obviously, when the tender comes back, we'll be able to report back to council to confirm the pricing and it match our 120.
So you're suggesting 2630 or 4220? So
Yes.
either Route 300 Saint-Thomas to the closed road of Lowndes, or either Route 400 Saint-Jacques to Saint-Joseph. Am I reading that correctly?
Exactly.
Are they in order of
Importance?
importance?
Those ones are, well, Route 300 would see more traffic, Route 400 a bit less, but they're both main collectors of the municipality. So again, and that's moving forward to have 2 layers of asphalt in those roads
2630.
and to be put towards in the same strategy.
So we have, so Councilor Ryan, you're suggesting we do 2630?
2630.
Councilor Associate, you have questions?
Yeah, Route 300 seems to be in really good shape, and I'm so curious.
We,
Monsieur Bourgon?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we currently only have 1 layer of asphalt on that road, and it's our busiest road in being EDR as well. So the strategy, it's actually worked towards having 3 lift of asphalt on that segment.
So it may be okay, yeah.
Exactly, it's already cracking, so
Yeah,
that's,
this is
and
more
again,
preventive.
that's why like that intervention, it's resurfacing, and that's why the plan speaks that way.
Yeah, and that's why the plan essentially says, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure.
Mhm.
It might look good now, but if we do this extra step, it'll make it last that much longer. So,
And even though it says 150, if we get it into the project plan, we may get it at 109 or 120.
And exactly, so that's why I'm thinking council, like once the tender closes, I'll be able to report back with that result.
okay, so Councilor Lorraine, you were moving to have it at 2630. Do we have a seconder?
We go with proposal from, Mr. Bourgon.
About 2630. Okay,
Et ça va sur le bord, ça y est. La route 300 de Saint-Thomas, juste à côté. Est-ce que c'est la route 300 qui sera à Limoges ou c'est de Saint-Thomas à Saint-Augustin?
C'est vers Limoges.
Monsieur Bourgon?
Et je voudrais aussi ajouter que pour le budget 2021, on va vous rapporter le plan 10 ans révisé selon le nouveau taux d'investissement.
Because that'll be gone now from that list, and then something else will pop up.
Well, exactly, we'll be able to bring all those segments off to match the new level of investment for
Because
roads.
we added 120 this year, it's automatically there next year, so.
If we add 1% next year, it's 240.
Exactly, so we'll be able to show council the plan of all the, like, adjusted and throughout the years, and that's an exercise that we already did, just to see how it would look like.
So I have,
So we need, when it comes to resolutions, then we should pull this out.
yes.
I need to make the recommendation to go to, put in the general pub,
Yeah,
and then to assign it to 2630.
that's correct.
Is that the recommendation from Mr. Bourgeois?
Yes.
But he offered two of them at first.
They're
They're one or the
They're
other.
one or
One or
the
the
other
other.
underneath each other.
Yeah, I know, but he said one or the other.
2630, Councilor Lorangas, 2630. But we'll be able to do that when he puts that amendment, we can ask Mr. Bourgeois if he's in agreement with that. Okay, so this one is pulled out of consent items, we'll deal with it separately. Next item, item H, Russell Transport Public Transportation Report EcoDev 0120. Questions, comments, members of council? I'll give you the opportunity. I'm just seeing if there's questions come up first. Okay. Madame Tremblay?
Donc, bonsoir, membre du conseil. Donc, vous avez un rapport devant vous qui vous présente exactement les faits de la situation présentement dans nos autobus. Donc, depuis le mois de novembre, nous avons remarqué une augmentation de l'achalandage de nos autobus. En observant les statistiques et en communiquant avec le 417 Bus-Line, certaines routes étaient à capacité, donc il y avait toujours 2 à 3 passagers qui étaient debout de la route d'Ottawa jusqu'à Embrun ou vice-versa le matin. Le 13 novembre, on a fait des changements mineurs à l'horaire d'autobus afin d'accommoder ces gens-là qui étaient debout. Donc, les changements mineurs, on pensait qu'ils étaient pour aider un petit peu au niveau des départs des autobus puis au niveau des arrivées à la maison. Donc, on a fait un survey au niveau des passagers, nos utilisateurs. On a eu 180 répondants qui nous ont indiqué si les changements qu'on prévoyait faire pouvaient un peu aider la situation. Donc, les changements qui ont été apportés, par exemple, à Saint-Laurent, par exemple, à l'option 3, il n'y avait pas de passagers qui embarquaient. Puis les gens ne prenaient pas cette option-là puisqu'ils arrivaient plus tard à la maison. Donc, on a enlevé cette option-là pour faire un petit peu un transfert d'autobus de l'option 2 à l'option 3. Puis aussi, à l'option 3, la station Herdman, il n'y a pas personne non plus qui embarquait. Donc, on a enlevé aussi cet arrêt-là justement pour que les gens shiftent un petit peu de l'option 2 à l'option 3. By removing the Saint-Laurent Lemieux stop in the morning for option 3, we're hoping that the arrival time of 7:22 a.m. in Ottawa will be respected. So people were complaining that 7:22, they were getting at the work at 7:40 instead of 7:22, and that's why we removed that stop, so it could be arriving on time. By removing the Herdman stop in the afternoon for option 3, the expecting arrival time in Embrun would be earlier, and possibly passenger would change route option and then better distribute the number of passengers between the options. With all the new subdivision in Embrun and Russell, it is obvious that the interest in public transport is increasing, and we must increase the level of service to continue to offer reliable and safe public transit service. So in the Highway Traffic Act, there's a section that says that the transporter that offered our service cannot accommodate more than 10% of the seating places in our buses. So that means at 6 people, you could start refusing people coming from Ottawa to Embrun. And that's the case that we've been seeing in November and December, and even more in January 2020. In 2019, the increase of Russell Transfer user allowed us to increase our revenues by more than $52,000 compared to what was budgeted for the users' fee revenues. So we've received the comments that how come we didn't plan that better in our budget of 2019. The increase that we saw was really coming from November and December, and this was not as extreme, I would say, in October, so it was hard for us to budget. So we keep track on our stats to who come at which station, like how many people we have at each stop every morning and at night. So, for example, in October, we didn't have any people standing up. In November, it happened 3 times, in December 4 times, and now in January. We just had the stats that came this afternoon, and there's 8 times that we had over 56 people standing. So for us, it's kind of hard to manage. We have as well our revenues by month, and the month of, some months are slower than others, but for revenues, for example, when we got to November, that's where we saw the increase as well for revenues that were a lot more than what the 2018 was, for example. So therefore, based on the fact that we receive a lot of complaints, obviously people don't want to pay $247 to be standing from Ottawa to Russell. The complaints were not coming just from the riders, but they were coming as well from the drivers, because for them it's a safety issue, and they were kind of put on the spot of what happened if I have 6 people standing in the morning, do I refuse them? And it was putting the township in a position that we had to do something to reassure that their users would have a place to sit. We even sent a reminder to the users that to keep their bag in front of them so the seat would be available, because we had complaints that people were taking 2 spots. So just to make sure that we're coming in front of council with a solution that it's not because people are putting bags on the second seat, it's because there's no more place in our buses. So we ask 417 bus line to provide us with options. You have the options that are attached to the email, to the report, sorry. One of the option was for 6 months at 3 weeks a day, 3 weeks per week, 3 days per week, sorry. That came up to an amount of $10,725 per month plus HST. We asked the same thing for the same type of bus for 6 months. And we also asked for the option of a smaller bus at 26 places for 3 weeks, 3 days a week, or 5 days a week. Based on the options and after discussions, we thought that since it's a proposal and it's a trial, that we would be more comfortable based on the increase of the amount of the contract to propose to council to go ahead with the mini coach bus with the 26 seats for 5 days a week for 6 months. So basically, we're looking at an amount total of $66,780 for 6 months period, including the HST. In order to recover some of our costs of the increase of level of service, obviously we recognize that it's an extra cost. We are suggesting as well to increase the pass fare of 2.5%. So as council remember, we did a feasibility study back in 2018. That was one of the suggestions of the consultant to increase the fare of our users. So that's why we're suggesting to increase the regular pass from $247 a month to $253 a month, and the student pass from $178 to $188. So that would increase our revenues based on the fact that if we're keeping the same ridership of 8,200 for the year of 2020. For what we're suggesting as well is that if, let's say, the 6 months is not worth it, and we feel that it's not increasing anymore or it's decreasing, then the pass fare would go back to the $247, and the student pass have $178. In January as well, we've received a request from an individual who has a Canadian National Institute for Blinds, like a CNIB identification cards. He was telling us that some of the transporters, for example, would give them a rebate because they have a card. So we're suggesting as well as part of this report to reduce the fare for somebody that would have a card. That, for example, we would reduce the rate for a student price from $182 to, instead of $253 would be $182. And the rebate of a certain percentage on the rate for a monthly passes booklet, and complete exemption there for free of service. So we're asking council right now to, in the recommendation, to reduce the rebate for 50% of the cost of the pass, for somebody that would have a card that would identify them as special needs. You have in the report, I think in the Appendix A, all the numbers. As you can see, the increase in revenues compared to what was budgeted. So we've budgeted $440,000. So in the presentation that was done in the budget session, we did anticipate an increase in ridership. So that's why we've moved our revenues from $430,000 to $440,000 in 2020. It was hard for us to expect that many riders. Just for example, we have 55 new riders from November to December that added to our system. That was not expected as mentioned earlier. So the Appendix A is showing the extra revenues. And as you can see it at the beginning of the report, what we're suggesting is to put in reserve that extra amount of money that was planned in the budget. So we could absorb the cost if, let's say, we have additional costs and the ridership doesn't increase for the next 6 months. I had discussion with Mario from 417 bus line as well. So if we were to, let's say in 3 months, decide that the extra bus is not worth it, then we would have a 50% cost of penalty for the next months that are left in the contract. So let's say if we go with the service for 3 months and we want to cancel after 3 months, then we would pay 50% of the 3 months remaining. So the impact would be less again, but we wouldn't offer that service. So we have a buyout if we were to cancel after 3 months. It's not a locked-in contract for 6 months. We are dealing with a lot of people that are not happy. So if council decide not to move ahead with one of the options tonight, I'm not going to come in at work tomorrow. I think I'm going to disappear. But we need to find a way or give a direction to the drivers to not accept those extra people and find another solution.
Okay, I'm going to go on this one first.
I know.
So in regards to the CNIB request, 100% no problem. In regards to putting the 26 passenger for the 5 days, again, I'm fine with it. I just do want to make a few comments. First, congratulations, because I've heard you for the last 2-3 years state that you want to lower the municipal contribution, and you have brought it down significantly. So I'm quite happy with that. That being said, it makes me laugh when 417 says, oh, they're willing to cut the penalty at 50%. Because I took the time today to print up the fares that they charge, for example, people in Limoges service. And when I do the math, essentially in 2019, between the province and the township, we gave $192,000 in public funds for this service. And if you calculate the amount of people we have, just based on the difference between what Limoges residents are paying and what we were paying, there's only a $40,000 difference. So assuming that he was charging the same amount to residents here if it was done privately, taxpayers would not be funding approximately $150,000 to this business. That's the reality. So when he says he's fine cutting the penalty in half, I'm sure he's fine cutting the penalty in half. He's getting an extra $150,000 of Ontario taxpayer money. So, he's in business, great for him, but I think at one point in time he has to realize that if this council ever decided to close that service from a municipal standpoint, as a business, he would continue doing it because he's done it. He's shown that he's done it in Casma, he's done it in Nation, he's done it in St. Isidore, where the service still continued. And they're not giving any gas tax funding. So he potentially has a loss of $150,000 if this becomes no longer a municipal issue. So I just want him to clearly understand that. So I don't want him to make it sound like he's giving us a break. He's making $150,000 off the taxpayer. So, that's
Annually.
annually, right? I think looking at the numbers, I understand for the budget perspective that, you know, where the numbers came in, it was slow throughout the year and a big jump at the end. And plus we got a lot more gas tax funding than we were expecting, hence why we have a bigger surplus. That being said, if we had known that bigger surplus was there, I don't think council would have budgeted a bigger surplus. So I'm not okay transferring that money into transit for next year. I'm willing to transfer what's the difference? Like if everything stays status quo, there's about a $7,000-8,000 difference, right? I'm okay transferring that amount, if council agrees with me, but I just keep the rest of the surplus in the general surplus that happens at the end of the year. Okay? So essentially, if you manage to stay status quo, we'll be looking at the same municipal contribution that council approved in the 2020 budget. And the extra funds will be distributed as per the policy we have in place. So that's my suggestion. If members of council have any questions in regards to this, I do understand there is complaints and we do want to accommodate. So I think this is a fair approach that we're accommodating our users and we're giving them essentially what we want. It's just we're not giving them the extra surplus. Okay? Because if I read correctly what you presented, the numbers, the three scenarios you're giving me doesn't take into consideration that surplus, right? So even if we don't give you the surplus, those are the numbers essentially we're looking at. And, you know, option one, you'll be as where you're supposed to be with the municipal contribution. And if option 2 or 3 come along, well, then you're ahead of your budget again this year. So, Councillor Associate, Councillor Brissot.
Okay, so what my concern was is that, you know, so many of the riders were happy with them, we're gonna increase the rate, so that was the one thing that and I kinda had a concern about the student rate more so. But it's totally unacceptable that 5 and 6 people are standing. I mean, that's just, you know, if that driver has to stop suddenly. You've got injured passengers and we don't want that. The other question was, you said they were not gonna stop at Ste-Marie, but I saw that it's still on the schedule. And I was just curious about that, because you said they won't be stopping at Herdman and Ste-Marie anymore.
So just for your information, again, the proposed schedule is something that we're still working on to see where the second bus is gonna come in and look at the stats. So we got the stat this morning for the January month. So we're gonna be able to more manage the time of when they're gonna come in between the two. So this schedule is not like set in stone yet. We're still working on it to see what are the changes that are gonna be proposed and when the new bus is gonna come in. We're proposing to get the new bus in between option 2 and 3 in the morning, and after option 1 in the afternoon. So that's where we're seeing more people. But for example, the survey gave us a bit of insight of why people were taking option 3 in the morning compared to the option 2. For example, they were saying that daycare opens at 6:30, and if, let's say, we were to move up the time from the option 3, then they wouldn't be able to take that bus anymore. So there's a lot of component that we still need to consider, but looking at the stats, we see exactly if there's nobody coming in or out of the bus at those stations, then we'll look at it and see.
And I mean, and also, I mean, we definitely have to run it 5 days. I think the 6 month is a good trial, because typically I think you probably do have increased ridership in the winter months.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it might drop off again after April or whatever. So this will give us a little trial to see what's happening. And I'm also in favor of the CNIB, because I've seen many cases, people with disabilities are actually, you know, they're charged more to park closer and things like that, right at their work, at their place of work. And I know my husband worked on something like that, where people, if they had to park in a disability spot, that they actually get a reduction instead of an increase. They were paying more than anybody else, just because they're closer, and that's wrong.
Thank you very much. Conseiller
Can I-
Dussault?
Oui. C'était mentionné pour l'augmentation. C'est ça, quand je regardais qu'est-ce qui remonte, sur 250 tu parles de 6 pour adultes puis 4 par étudiant. Fait que je trouve ça très raisonnable, très facile à expliquer. Même, je dirais que même si tu renlèves l'autre autobus, je resterais ce montant-là pareil. Parce que c'est des coûts qu'on va avoir quand même, tout ça. Puis que ce boss-là, écoutez, que quand il parle de la clause de que si elle coupe l'autre autobus, qu'on va revenir aux vieux rates, personnellement, non. Reste comme ils l'ont déjà eu à ce montant-là. Reste là à ce montant-là. Je pense pas qu'il y ait grand complaint pour 6 pour les adultes.
Great, merci. Well, I think realistically, if somebody decided that they weren't happy with the price of our service and decided for an extra $6 they were going to go on their own downtown, I think they'll pay that in no time in parking downtown.
Ouais, c'est ça.
Councillor Janoski.
Non, je suis d'accord avec le conseiller Brisson au niveau des prix. Si on va les monter, vous devez redescendre à 6 mois, je pense pas que ça a du bon sens. What I would look at is, like, obviously the demand pattern grows for the winter, which makes sense. We can see that in November, and even in past years, it's just grown by a lot more. So perhaps look at seasonal rates for that, like a lot of airlines and a lot of transportation companies do that. And that might have an impact. That might, like, focus your demand or decrease your demand. And if you have peak times for certain routes and you want to kind of égaliser la demande à travers tous les circuits, you might be able to look at the value of those, peak times. So that, I would look at that anyways. I think it's good that we're offering the added service, but definitely I don't want to ask to be self-funding. And then the other question I quickly had, and I'm sure we have good research to validate it, but is there a reason why we have no buses leaving downtown after 5? Just there is no demand?
Madame Tremblay.
Initially, we were limited to the number of routes, and those were the most popular. We've never had a request to add more after 5. So even in the transit feasibility study, we had a survey and it was not requested, and in this one as well, we even requested to see if people would even come from the afternoon, let's say on Monday and Friday, to have like a bus in the afternoon and bring them back, because sometimes people have compressed hours, and it was not something that people requested.
Yep. Conseiller Lorraine and Conseiller Brisson.
Have we thought of the different levels of service that one person's gonna get to the other, if one's taking the coach and the other one's taking the semi-coach, right? One's got some amenities that the other one doesn't have, right? So who gets to sit on the big bus and who has to sit on the short bus? And if I gotta sit on the short bus, am I paying less? Am I paying more? Now I'm getting an increase, but I get the short bus every day. Yet, like, how do we get around that issue?
Just my first comment would be, the person has the option to take the short bus or the long bus. The time, there's a few minute difference in time period, but if I don't like the short bus, then I'll adjust my schedule 5 or 10 minutes or whatever the difference is to take the other bus. Now,
Right, if we've got everyone that shows up for that one bus, and you got people that are waiting, that are standing, 6 or 7 people that are standing, well, those people are now gonna go on the other bus, but they're paying more now.
everybody. Mr.
Right.
Major?
Madame Tremblay, est-ce qu'on connaît la différence entre un coach puis au point de vue, I've seen some smaller buses with a same seating arrangement, same air conditioning, may not be the bigger environment, but certainly the seating capacity or seating quality is still as good. So to me, I'm not too sure if it's that much of a difference, but I would have to ask if that's the case.
I don't think it's a difference between a coach bus and a half-size school bus. That's, we're not talking that, but I was looking at renting a short bus for a trip, and they're pretty similar.
So Mario confirmed to us because we asked a question and that was one of our concern as well. It's similar, it's just smaller and the seats are the same. It's not like a school bus. It's, there's less seat, but they're as comfortable. I think there's no washroom. That's one of the difference. But he says that nobody's using the washroom anyway in the big bus, in the coach buses. So obviously we're aware that we're gonna get complaints. We're not reducing the cost because again, we can't know if who's taking whose bus, like which one are they taking. So that's why we've decided to suggest to council to keep the same amount for the monthly pass. How we're gonna control it is the base time basically. So if, let's say right now, the option is, when you come back, for example, the new bus would be at 3:35. If you don't wanna take the short bus, then you still have the option to wait for the 3 hour and 42. So it's like a 5 minutes difference in between the two. Before we didn't have that option, right? Because the difference, it was a 40 minutes in between the two buses. Now we're adding, so it's closer. And if you don't wanna be on this smaller bus, then you still have the option to wait a 5 minutes and take the bigger bus.
If there's spots available.
In option, the way that it's managed, it's option 1 that is really busy in the afternoon. So that's why we're putting the bus in between 2 and 3. So if it's too busy in the 1, they have the option to go in the new bus, which is 5 minutes after, and then you have a 5 minutes after, which there's still room in the option 3. So that's why how we manage the time is to make them closer, that if you don't wanna go in the short bus, then you have the option to wait 5 minutes at the same stop and take the
Right.
5
And
minute
we're
later bus.
Realistically, we're looking at 5 or 10 people
Yeah.
extra standing, and this bus capacity is 26.
And it gives a opportunity to the bus driver to give that option. Say you don't wanna take my bus, then there's another one in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And is there still, maybe I should know this, but is there still Wi-Fi in the big bus?
Yes, but it's
Will
not
it be
always
on the bus?
working, no. We're not paying anymore for the Wi-Fi because it was not working,
Great.
half of the
Adequately.
time. Yeah, so we're not paying and not offering the Wi-Fi anymore. And again, in the survey, users were saying that it doesn't work half the time, so it's not worth it to have it.
Okay.
Dernière question, conseiller Bisson?
Moi, je faisais juste me demander pourquoi 6 mois? Parce qu'on voit que ça baisse beaucoup au bout de 5-6 mois. On n'a pas l'option de faire comme un 3 ou 4 mois. Et comme ça serait comme, tu sais, c'est quand je regardais, parce que tout de suite, quand tu arrives au mois de juin, il y a une bonne grosse drop, que si on pouvait l'avoir pour 4 mois, puis avoir cette option-là, puis peut-être que ça serait de même à l'année, parce que là, après ça, ça remonte en septembre, que tu vois que ça, septembre-octobre.
Madame Tremblay?
Mais au moins pour le try-out, qu'il y ait 4 mois au lieu de 6.
Vous n'allez pas aimer ma réponse. On n'a pas eu l'option. On l'a demandé. C'est pour ça qu'on a demandé la clause de s'en sortir avant le 6 mois. Le minimum, c'était le 6 mois parce que c'est beaucoup d'implications pour l'entreprise, d'avoir un chauffeur d'extra, d'avoir un autobus de prêt d'extra. Puis pour lui, il n'y a pas d'avantage de le faire pour 4 mois. Donc le minimum du contrat qu'on nous a offert, c'est 6 mois. C'est pour ça qu'on a demandé la clause de s'en sortir avant que le 6 mois termine. Qu'on aurait la clause de pénalité de 50% de ce qui reste.
Conseiller Larry?
Sorry, my last comment. I'm gonna disagree with one thing you said there. It's not to his benefit to do that. I mean, come on, like the mayor said, he's getting $150,000 from us, and he wants to squeeze that little bit extra as well. I mean, let's be reasonable. Let's be real here. I understand that he's got a business to go,
Yeah.
but he could reasonably say you can have a 3-month or a 4-month deal versus a 6-month deal, because we also have the fact that we've got the whole deal that we can say no to. And he loses $150,000 instead of $3,000 or $4,000 for that month.
For the benefit, I'm not going to repeat our conversation that we had. It was
a very,
entertaining.
He wouldn't want our conversations then.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm pretty sure it would be the same conversation that we
yeah,
had.
because realistically, council has to ask themselves, we're getting close to the point where, we're going up to 253?
Free.
253, and people in Limoges are paying 275. What happens when we start slowly increasing and we find ourselves equal with the private sector? Why are we even in this business? If they can get the same out of the private sector, and we don't have to put municipal funds or provincial funds into it. At that point in time, he has to realize that conversation's coming. And if we're forced to continuously have to increase our service and we charge more, and he's offering the same to residents close by, and we're roughly gonna be the same price, but the only difference is he's getting a few $100,000 out of between the province and the municipal governments, well then, we have to have a serious conversation then. Okay, parfait. So this item has to be removed as well. Okay, item 12, reports the investigator des buttons, we have none. Item 13, notice motions, we have none. Item 14, question period on meeting of the day. We don't have any questions. Item 15, resolutions. Motion that council approve all recommendations listed on the agenda under number 11, reports from department, council, committees. We'll put on the table, then we'll remove certain items, so I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Tonoski, second by Conseil Brisson. Except for
11F, G, and H.
11G, F, G, and H. Need a mover and a seconder for that amendment. Moved by Conseiller Lorraine, second by Conseiller Associé. All those in favor of removing these three items? Approved. So now we will pass this resolution except for these three items. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So now we will go to item F, the resolution for council remuneration bylaw update, report FS 01-2020. The council receives report FS 01-2020 dated February 3rd, 2020, and approves the first reading of 1, the proposed bylaw updating the council members' remuneration and expense bylaw, and 2, the proposed bylaw updating the honorariums for non-elected members of committees and local boards. I need a mover and a seconder to put it on the table. We need Councilor Tonoski, Conseil Brisson. We had discussed that item 2 could be done for a second and third reading, so I need the amended for that if council wishes to do that. Conseiller Tonoski, seconder, Councilor Saucier. So then we will change that the proposed bylaw updating the honorariums for non-elected members of committees and local boards be read a first, second, and third time. I guess that's the easiest way to do that. Monsieur Leduc?
I would probably add that and approves the first reading of number 1, and approves first, second, and third reading of number 2.
Oh, you would change it in the heading at the beginning?
At the beginning, just before number 2. That's where we would add.
Okay, so you're okay with those changes, Madame Camille?
Yes.
So essentially what we're doing is first reading on the first item, that'll come back in 2 weeks, and the honorariums are getting approved tonight. So, did I give you a mover and a seconder for that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of that amendment? All those opposed? Carried. So now we will go to the next item. Item G, for the extra paving report, ISPW 01-2020. So it currently reads that council receives report ISPW 01-2020 dated February 3rd, 2020, and improves to include St. Augustin Road from Route 300 to La Madeleine Street in the 2020 paving budget. And that council gives direction to the administration to proceed with completing an infrastructure fund bylaw applying option C as detailed in appendix C. So based on the conversations we had, I would suggest that under number 1, we change St. Augustin Road from Route 300 to La Madeleine Street to Monsieur Bourgon. What are you suggesting?
Well, from the conversation that we had, it could set to road segment 2630, which is a portion of Route 300.
Road segment 2630.
Exactly. Portion of.
Well, it would be the full length of that segment.
Of that segment.
Yes.
Right, because they're broken down into segments, not necessarily the whole road. Okay, and then in the second item, that council gives direction to administration to proceed with completed infrastructure fund bylaw applying option C as detailed in the appendix C. We're essentially cutting that out completely, but that we say that the $120,000 2020 contribution be added to the infrastructure fund for roads. Monsieur Leduc?
Well, if it's clear that there's not gonna be an expansion fund as represented in that page 194 of the package, then you could remove
that whole section.
Yes.
Are we okay with removing?
If you want to discuss further, then we can bring it back at the next meeting if you want to, but if that's clear, then we don't need to have it.
Okay, so we have to road segment 2630 in the first paragraph, and that we remove the second paragraph completely. So let's put that amendment on the table, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Conseiller Saucier. So questions, Conseiller Lorrain?
Can we ask, Susan to bring back a report on where that money will go going forward to ensure that it goes into infrastructure? Because I think we have passed a resolution that assigned it specifically to road projects separate from this. So I think we did that.
Monsieur Godin, I think we said specifically roads, but we didn't.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I would maybe recommend, I don't think we need to include anything in this resolution, but we've already committed through the budget discussions that we had that we were gonna review the infrastructure fund bylaw. So regardless of this decision here, we have a good idea of your intention, so we will still bring back that bylaw. The resolution that was adopted in 2010 will be revised in about 14 years.
Okay, other questions? So we have an amendment on the table to change the Saint Augustin Road to road segment 2630 and to remove the second paragraph. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor?
I only have a mover and seconder for the main.
Oh, for the main?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought I put it, okay.
I thought that was.
Yeah, okay, so Conseiller Lorrain, Conseiller Associé. Okay. So all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Carried. So now we approve it as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So now we fall to the last item, the Russell Transpo Public Transportation Service. So it reads that council approves the report EcoDev 01-2020 dated February 3rd, 2020. That council approves the bylaw for the amendment to the contract with 417 Bus Line, Schedule C of the contract, to add a morning bus and an afternoon bus for a period of 6 months, the equivalent of an additional amount of $65,265, plus $1,155, equaling $66,780. This amount includes the non-refundable municipal HST portion of 1.76%, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to sign the documents, and that council approves the proposed bylaw to amend Schedule A7 transit fee of the user fees and charges bylaw 2019-160 to 1, increase the cost of monthly bus passes to $253 and student monthly passes to $182. Item 2, add the following clause: Canadian National Institute of the Blind CNIB identification card 50% rebate on monthly passes and booklets. And the third item is that council approves that the 2019 budgetary anticipated surplus associated to the public transportation service be transferred to the 2020 operational budget in order to help absorb the additional cost of the proposed offer. Need a mover and a seconder to put it on the table. Moved by Conseiller Garrison, seconded by Councilor Ternowski. Based on the discussions we had, I'm looking if we want to remove simply the last item in regards to the surplus. Councilor Lorrain?
Yeah, well, we talked about that $7,000 amount, so I think we can put it in that last sentence. Says that council approves that $7,000 of the 2019 budgetary anticipated surplus associated to the public transportation service be transferred to the 2020 operational budget in order to help absorb the additional cost of the proposal.
Okay. Is that okay?
That works.
Roche? Okay, so we have that being moved as an amendment. I just need a second and then we'll have that question.
So I'll move that.
Move it. Seconder, Councilor Ternowski. Now we have questions. Councilor Saucier.
I just was concerned with just the word in the CNIB, like what about, people with other disabilities, like, say somebody has cerebral palsy or something and they're using our service, would they get a reduction also, or is it just blind people?
So right now, it's just to the people that have that
CNIB.
card and that are blind.
Because you had that request.
Yeah, I had that request and the person came at the office and showed us and told us that OC Transco, for example, were offering those rebates. We didn't have any other requests.
I'm just concerned if any of our other riders have a disability and then they have to pay more.
They could always make that
Make the same
request.
request,
And
yeah.
part of your report was to refund that person the
Yeah,
money.
in January, since they got a pass since a couple, I think December or January. So we've asked that council say that it's retroactive since he purchased the pass. So we're gonna give them the amount, so we could do the same
Yeah.
if we have a specific
Request.
request.
Okay, merci.
Conseiller Lalonde?
Instead of refunding them that 50%, could we not just say that the next 3 months
Yeah.
are free?
So yeah, that's again an option that we gave them, so if they wanted to try the service initially, so that's why they buy the pass. If they wanna continue, the rebate would be applying to the next passes, if they continue using the service.
Perfect. Conseiller Brisson?
C'est juste pour m'assurer que quand on dit là, que c'est increase, qu'il n'y aura pas dedans, mais qu'il n'y aura pas leur baisser si jamais le boss repart, que ça reste de ce prix-là. Il n'y a pas nulle part, il faut le mentionner, ça, c'est juste nous autres.
Ben,
We
c'est
didn't
that-
mention it in the recommendation, so it was a suggestion in the report, so the way I think the recommendation is written, qu'il n'y aura pas de baisse, que l'adoption de l'augmentation de la passe va rester la même.
Yeah, and I think council pretty much agreed with that.
So it's still
You
the same.
have- If ever there's an issue and it has to come before council again, then we can make it more official, but at this point in time, I think it's quite clear. Okay, so we have the amendment on the table for the $7,000. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Carried. Approve as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Resolutions are done. We will now move on to item 16, bylaws. Motion that council approves bylaws 2020-009 to 2020-13 inclusively for first, second, and third reading as listed on the agenda. Y avait-tu des changements là, madame? Je pense pas.
Nope.
12 or 13 was not impacted by the amendments?
Well, right now, we're just doing item A, and then item B is that's where there might be some changes
12 and 13
Well,
are
12 and
okay.
13 are the transit.
Do you have any amendments?
on the bylaw itself.
Was what we made the change,
Is that reflected
is
in the
that,
bylaw?
was that reflected in those bylaws, or are they fine without that $7,000 transfer?
We're fine.
Fine, yeah.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder for item A in the bylaw, moved by Councilor Brisson, seconded by Councilor Chamaski. All in favor? All opposed? Carried. So now we have item B, which was motion that council approves bylaw 2020-14 and 2020-15 inclusively for first reading as listed on the agenda. The first one being the council member remuneration, the second one being the honorariums. So that we'll put on the table, then we'll have to separate the two. So I need a mover and a seconder, moved by Councilor Janoski, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. Then we'll need somebody to propose and second that we split these two items. So, although I need a mover and a seconder to split the two, moved by Councilor Lorrain, seconded by Councilor Sosi. All in favor of splitting the two? Carried. So let's deal with the 2020-14. That's just for the first reading. So I need a mover and a seconder to put it on the table. Moved by Councilor Janoski, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. All those in favor of the first reading? All those opposed? Carried on the first reading. Item now 2020-15 for the honorariums. I need a mover and a seconder to put on the table. Moved by Councilor Brisson, seconded by Councilor Janoski. Need someone to move and second to change this to a first, second, and third reading. Moved by Councilor Brisson, seconded by
That's low, right?
Lorrain and Councilor Chernowski.
It's the
Okay.
other way.
Now we have it. That's putting it on the table or the amendment?
That's the amendment.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? All those, okay, now we approve it as amended. All those in favor? Carried. Item 17, new business reports. Item 18, other business. Item A, myself, establishment of French Language University in the City of Cornwall. We got a request for the City of Cornwall They wanted to send a resolution, they want to try and get the French language university that's supposed to go in Toronto. I just brought it up, if council is interested in supporting the resolution, if not, then we just move on and that's it, that's all. No interest in moving it forward, okay, perfect, we'll move on. Item B, conseil Lorraine, you're fine with everything, okay. Item 19, we have none, we are going into closed session. Item, move into closed session at the hour of 9:14 PM to address matters pertaining to section 239 Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001, chapter 25, consider matters relating to 1. Proposed acquisition of land in Emblem, verbal report under section 2C, proposer pending acquisition and disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Item 2, closed session minutes of the regular council meeting dated January 13th, 2020. Need a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councilor Tomasky, seconded by Conseiller Laurent. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. We're now going